Hello everyone, I am Uncle Joe, and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching now? Believe me, this story will put you to sleep in no time, because if anyone knows how to do that, it's me. Get comfortable and relax. The headlights struggled to pierce the heavy curtain of rain as I peered into the darkness of the empty road ahead. A sense of foreboding washed over me. I should have heeded the warning signs and avoided this shortcut. Yet, time was not on my side, and I was already late for my sister's engagement party. As the wind howled and the rain battered against my windshield, a chilling thought crept into my mind. Perhaps this was a decision I would come to regret. The decision I had made all year weighed heavily on me when I heard it. A sputtering cough from the engine, followed by an ominous rattle. No, I muttered, gripping the steering wheel tighter. The car lurched, losing speed rapidly, and I managed to guide it to the shoulder before it shuddered to a complete stop. I sat there for a moment, listening to the rain drumming on the roof, trying to calm my racing heart. This couldn't be happening, not here, not now. I fished my phone out of my purse, praying for at least one bar of signal. Nothing, of course. With a deep breath, I popped the hood and stepped out into the deluge. The rain soaked through my clothes instantly, plastering my hair to my face. I propped open the hood and peered inside, the meager light from my phone revealing absolutely nothing. Just then, a pair of headlights appeared in the distance, growing brighter as they approached. I waved my arms, hoping they'd stop. To my relief, the vehicle, a pickup truck, slowed and pulled up behind me. A man stepped out, raincoat pulled tight around him, and approached with a friendly demeanor. As the storm raged around us, he mentioned his car troubles, and I responded, striving to mask the urgency in my tone. It just died on me. I don't know what's wrong. He nodded and stepped closer to examine the engine. Mind if I take a look? I stepped back, relieved for his assistance. Please, be my guest. As he leaned in, the light from my phone cast shadows across his face, revealing a man older than I had first assumed, perhaps in his 50s with graying hair and deep-set eyes. There was something unsettling about those eyes, but I pushed the feeling aside. As the tension hung in the air, he finally spoke, his voice steady. "It seems your alternator might be shot," he said after a thoughtful pause. "Not something we can fix out here, I'm afraid." My heart sank at his words, and I muttered under my breath, "Great, just great." He straightened up, wiping his hands on his jeans, and offered, "I can give you a ride to the nearest town. There's a mechanic there who might be able to help." I hesitated, a chill creeping in as every instinct warned me against getting into a car with a stranger, especially on a night like this. But what choice did I have? "That would be great. Thank you," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. With a forced smile, he grinned back, and something about that smile sent a shiver down my spine. "Happy to help. Grab whatever you need and hop in. I'm Jake, by the way." "Olivia," I replied quickly, gathering my purse and a small overnight bag from the back seat. I climbed into his truck, the warmth inside a stark contrast to the chill outside. As we pulled away, I cast one last glance at my car, a lonely silhouette in the rain. "So, Olivia," Jake said as we drove, "what brings you out to these parts on such a nasty night?" "I was heading to my sister's engagement party," I answered, feeling the weight of the storm around us. I explained that I thought I'd take a shortcut, but it seemed that backfired. He chuckled, a low, gravelly sound. "Shortcuts have a way of doing that, don't they? You from around here?" he asked. I shook my head. "No, just visiting. Born and raised," he replied, pride evident in his voice. "I know these roads like the back of my hand." We lapsed into silence for a few minutes, the rhythmic swish of the wipers the only sound. I found myself studying Jake out of the corner of my eye. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles white. Every so often, he'd glance my way. With an unsettling smile playing on his lips, he suddenly broke the silence. "So, tell me about yourself, Olivia. What do you do for a living? I hesitated, keeping my answer vague. Something deep within urged me to tread carefully with personal details. A teacher, huh? That's admirable work. What grade? He asked. Third, I replied, though I actually taught high school. I preferred to keep that to myself. Jake nodded, his gaze fixed on the road. You married? Got kids? The question caught me off guard, and a wave of unease washed over me. No, I said. Not yet. He clicked his tongue, the sound echoing in the stillness of the night. There was a pretty girl, her tongue caught in a web of embarrassment. I shifted uncomfortably in my seat, searching for a way to steer the conversation elsewhere. How much further to town? I asked, hoping to break the tension. Oh, we've got a ways to go yet, he replied, that smile creeping back onto his face. Plenty of time to chat. My heart began to race. I didn't recall the town being this far when I had passed through earlier. I tried to focus on the road, straining to find familiar landmarks, but the rain blurred everything beyond the reach of the headlights. And you know, Jake continued, his tone drawing me in. In a soft, measured tone, I spoke. It's not safe for a woman to be out alone on a night like this. All sorts of unsavory characters are about. I swallowed hard, my mouth suddenly dry. I'm usually more careful, I managed to say. He glanced at me, his eyes glinting in the dim light. Oh, I'm sure you are, but sometimes careful just isn't enough. A chill ran down my spine, one that had nothing to do with my wet clothes. I subtly checked the door handle, relieved to find it unlocked. At least I had an escape route if I needed it. You said there was a mechanic in town, I asked, trying to steer the conversation back to safer ground. Jake nodded. Old Bill, known him for years. He'll take good care of you. Something in the way he said it made my skin crawl. I found myself wondering if there really was a mechanic named Bill or if Jake was just leading me on. We turned off the main road onto a narrow, unpaved track. Trees loomed on either side, their branches reaching out like gnarled fingers in the darkness. This doesn't look like the way to town, I said, unable to keep the fear out of my voice. Jake chuckled softly, mentioning a little detour due to flooded roads ahead. I didn't believe him for a second. My heart pounded so fiercely I was certain he could hear it. I gripped my purse tighter, searching for my keys. They weren't much, but they felt like my only defense if the need arose. You know, Jake said, his voice shifting to a deeper, more unsettling tone. I've been driving these roads for decades, picking up all sorts of interesting folks, but none quite as interesting as you, Olivia. I remained silent, my mind racing with escape plans. Could I jump? As we traveled, the truck rolled along at a steady pace, the rain drumming against the metal roof. I felt a twinge of anxiety. If I were to tumble out, the slick ground could easily lead to injury. My mind raced with thoughts of escape, yet I was lost, unsure of where to run. Jake, seemingly oblivious to my unease, spoke up with a hint of mischief in his voice. I bet you're wondering where we're really going, aren't you? Well, don't you worry. We're almost there. Just then, a crumbling house emerged from the shadows, its silhouette stark against the stormy sky. Jake brought the truck to a halt, the engine's rumble fading into an eerie silence. Here we are, he said, turning to me with a grin. Home sweet home. Home. I gazed at the house, a chill creeping down my spine. The paint hung in tatters from the weathered siding, and several windows were ominously boarded up. This was clearly not the town I remembered, and there was no mechanic in sight. I think there's been a misunderstanding, I stammered, my voice trembling. I really need to get to town. Jake's smile widened, revealing teeth that were yellowed and unsettling. Oh, I don't think there's been any misunderstanding at all, Olivia. I think you know exactly what's going on here. My hand instinctively closed around my keys, gripping them tightly as if they were a weapon. Please, I pleaded for my release, assuring him that my lips would remain sealed. His laughter, a cruel and joyless echo, sent a shiver down my spine. Why would I let you go? We're only beginning, he taunted. In that chilling moment, I understood that I had to act swiftly. As Jake reached for me, I swung my fist, the keys jutting between my fingers, striking his face and drawing forth a crimson response. His howl of pain and fury provided the precious moment I needed. I scrambled for the door, flinging it open and propelling myself into the rain-soaked night. I crashed to the ground, mud splattering my clothes, yet the rush of adrenaline surged through me. Propelled by an unseen force, I moved deeper into the woods, the echoes of Jake's curses trailing behind me like a distant storm. The truck door slammed shut, a finality that urged me onward. I stumbled through the underbrush, branches clawing at my face, roots lurking beneath the surface, eager to trip me with every hurried step. Jake's shouts faded into the background, a haunting reminder of the chase that fueled my flight, even as the fire in my lungs begged for respite. Time twisted around me, each fleeting moment stretching into an eternity. Eventually, silence enveloped me, the only sound the gentle patter of rain easing to a drizzle. Through the gaps in the canopy above, I caught glimpses of the world beyond, a place that felt both familiar and foreign. As the first hints of dawn began to lighten the sky, a sense of hope flickered within me. Just when I thought I could go no further, I burst forth from the tree line and onto a paved road. In the distance, I could see the outlines of buildings, the town I had been striving to reach all along. Staggering toward civilization, I noticed a car approaching. With a frantic wave, I silently prayed it wasn't Jake. To my immense relief, a kindly-looking elderly couple pulled over, their faces etched with concern. "Are you all right, dear?" the woman asked as I collapsed into their back seat. I shook my head, tears finally spilling forth. Spilling over, I managed to say between sobs, "No, I will be. Can you take me to the police station?" As we drove into town, I watched the sun rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. I felt safe, yet the memory of that night would linger in the shadows of my mind for a long time. I made a silent vow to myself. No more shortcuts, no more trusting strangers. Sometimes the longest way around is the safest way home. The key card clicked, and I pushed open the door to room 237, eager to collapse onto the bed after a grueling journey. After a long day of meetings, I entered the mundane motel room, unaware that it concealed a secret that would lead me into a night of unforgettable terror. I tossed my briefcase onto the worn armchair and loosened my tie, surveying the room with a sigh. It was your typical budget motel fare: outdated floral wallpaper, a lumpy bed, and a TV that had certainly seen better days. But I reassured myself that it was just for one night. Tomorrow I would return home, away from this godforsaken town and its endless string of client presentations. As I began to unpack my overnight bag, as I moved through the dimly lit room, my foot snagged on something in the thin carpet, causing me to stumble. I caught myself on the edge of the bed, frowning as I knelt down to investigate. There, partially hidden by the bed skirt, lay a small metal ring. My curiosity piqued. I gave it a gentle tug. To my astonishment, a section of the carpet lifted, revealing a trap door beneath. My heart raced at this unexpected discovery, and 1,000 questions swirled in my mind. What was this doing here? Where could it possibly lead? I hesitated, a battle of common sense and curiosity waging within me. The sensible choice would be to call the front desk to report the find and request a new room, but something held me back. Perhaps it was the thrill of the unknown, or maybe I was just too tired to deal with moving rooms. Whatever the reason, I found myself reaching for the handle. The trapdoor opened with a soft creak, revealing a narrow ladder descending into darkness. The air that wafted up was cool and damp, carrying a musty odor that made me wrinkle my nose. I fished my phone out of my pocket, switching on the flashlight. The beam illuminated a small, cramped space below. There was a peculiar crawl space or tunnel that seemed to stretch far beyond the limits of my room. Against my better judgment, I found myself lowering onto the ladder, each rung creaking softly beneath my weight as I descended. My heart raced in my chest, the flashlight flickering to life and casting eerie shadows on the walls, which appeared to be nothing more than bare earth, held up by old wooden beams. As my feet finally touched the ground, I had to hunch over, careful not to bump my head on the low ceiling. I swept the light around, taking in the mysterious surroundings, the tunnel extending ominously in both directions. Disappearing into darkness, the walls were lined with pipes and old electrical wiring, resembling some kind of maintenance access. But why would it be accessible from a guest room? Curiosity overrode caution, and I decided to explore a bit further. I chose the direction that I thought led deeper into the motel and started walking, my footsteps muffled by the earth and floor. As I moved deeper into the tunnel, the air grew cold, older, and damper. Water dripped somewhere in the distance, the sound echoing ominously. I was about to, as I turned back, a sound reached my ears, causing me to freeze in my tracks. It was a collection of voices, muffled and distant, yet undeniably human. My instinct urged me to call out, but something held me back. There was an urgency to the voices, a tension that sent a shiver down my spine. I crept forward, drawn to the sound. As I drew nearer, the words began to crystallize. "Shipments coming in tomorrow night. We need to be ready." Another voice chimed in. "What about the cops? Thompson's been sniffing around." The reply sent a chill through me. "Don't worry about Thompson. He's been taken care of." My blood ran cold at that revelation. It became clear that this was no ordinary exchange. The air was thick with tension, and I felt an unsettling chill creep down my spine. I moved closer, my senses heightened, straining to catch every whispered word. "The boss wants this to go smoothly. No mistakes this time," one voice said, urgency lacing their tone. "Got it. Yeah, we'll be ready. What time?" "Midnight, the usual spot." I leaned in, eager for more, when suddenly my foot slipped on a slick patch of ground. I stumbled, my hand reaching out to steady myself against the wall. But in the process, my phone slipped from my grasp, clattering to the ground. The flashlight beam flickered and spun, casting erratic shadows, and in an instant, the voices fell silent. My heart raced, pounding in my chest as I realized I had been discovered. Footsteps echoed in the stillness, drawing nearer. A wave of panic washed over me as I fumbled for my phone, the darkness wrapping around me like a shroud. Was that a sound? Did you hear it too? I urged myself to check, my heart racing. Grabbing my phone, I turned, ready to flee back the way I came, but in my frantic state, I took a wrong turn. The footsteps grew louder, and I caught sight of a flashlight beam dancing behind me. I dashed forward, no longer concerned with being quiet, my lungs burning as I struggled for breath in the stifling tunnel. Shouts rang out behind me, pushing me to run even faster, and suddenly, my foot snagged on something, perhaps a root or a stray piece of debris. It was hard to tell. I fell, landing face first in the dirt, pain radiating through my knee and palms. Yet, adrenaline surged within me, propelling me onward. I scrambled to my feet just as a beam of light illuminated the darkness around me. "Hey, stop right there." The voice echoed, but I didn't dare look back. I simply ran. The tunnel stretched on, twisting and turning, a labyrinth of shadows. I had lost all sense of direction, unsure of how to return to my room. All that mattered was escape. Just when I thought my legs might give out, I spotted something ahead, a ladder reminiscent of hope. In the stillness of the night, I found myself drawn to the presence lurking in my room. Without a moment's hesitation, I lunged for it, practically soaring up the rungs. I burst through the trapdoor, landing in another motel room, shrouded in darkness and silence. Thank the stars, I swiftly shut the trapdoor and dragged the nearest piece of furniture, a heavy dresser, to barricade it. Panting heavily, I leaned against the wall, trying to catch my breath and piece together the fragments of what had just unfolded. I had stumbled upon something significant, something perilous. Those men in the tunnel were clearly entangled in nefarious deeds, and now they were aware that someone had overheard their secrets. As I cautiously peered out the window, I sought to gather my bearings. I found myself on the ground floor at the back of the motel, while my room awaited me on the second floor near the front. Whose room was this? When might they return? A plan began to take shape in my mind. I needed to escape swiftly. But first, I had to return to my room and collect my belongings, ensuring I left no trace of my presence. With a deep breath, I opened the door and glanced around. The parking lot lay still, devoid of any suspicious activity. I slipped out, striving to appear casual as I made my way back to safety. As I ascended the stairs to the second floor, a sense of unease settled in my chest. What if they had already discovered my room? What if they were lying in wait for me? With my key card in hand, I approached my door, taking a moment to steady my breath. I swiped the card and pushed the door open, half expecting to confront a band of angry figures. To my surprise, the room was just as I had left it, empty. A wave of relief washed over me, but I knew I had to act quickly. Gathering my belongings, I hurriedly stuffed clothes into my bag, my thoughts racing with the urgency of escape. I called the police, but what could I say? That I had eavesdropped on a criminal conversation while trespassing in a secret tunnel? Sounded absurd even to me. The wisest choice was to leave quietly and anonymously. I could ponder my next steps once I was far from this place. I took one last look around the room, ensuring I hadn't left anything behind. The trapdoor gaped open, a dark maw in the floor. I hesitated for a moment, then closed it and dragged the armchair over it. It wasn't much, but it felt like a small barrier against the unknown. It might slow them down if they came looking. With my bag packed, I took a deep breath and opened the door. The hallway lay still, and I made my way to the stairs, forcing myself to walk at a normal pace, despite every instinct urging me to run. As I reached the lobby, voices drifted from the front desk. I froze, recognizing one of them as the man from the tunnel. Panic threatened to overwhelm me, but I pushed it down. The front was no option. I had to find another way. I backtracked, following signs to a side exit, just as I pushed. As the door creaked open, a shout echoed behind me, a chilling reminder that I had been spotted. Panic surged through me, and I ran, no longer concerned with the shadows of suspicion. I dashed across the parking lot toward my car, fumbling with the keys as the shouts grew louder, closer. At last, I managed to fling the door open and hurl myself inside. The engine roared to life just as two figures burst from the motel entrance. In a frantic rush, I threw the car into reverse and tore out of the parking lot, the tires screeching against the asphalt. In the rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of them sprinting toward a parked vehicle, intent on following me. My hands trembled as dark streets unfolded before me, each turn a whisper of uncertainty. I found myself glancing into the mirror, pondering how far they might pursue, and what fate awaited if they caught up. Hours slipped by as I took random turns, retracing my path, desperately trying to shake off any shadows that lingered behind. It was only with the first light of dawn that I felt a small sigh of relief escape my lips. I pulled into a rest stop, weary and shaken, the night's events swirling in my mind like a haunting melody. I realized how perilously close I had danced with danger, all stemming from a hidden trapdoor and my own insatiable curiosity. As I sat there, the world around me began to awaken, yet the echoes of the night still lingered in the air. As the sun began to rise, I found myself lost in thought, pondering my next steps. One undeniable truth emerged. My perception of motel rooms would forever be altered. Some secrets, tucked away behind closed doors, are perhaps best left untouched. The first drop of rain struck my face, a chilling omen of what was to come. I gazed up at the gathering storm clouds, lamenting my misfortune. What had begun as a serene day hike was on the brink of transforming into an unforgettable nightmare. I had been wandering for hours, relishing the solitude of the forest and the crispness of the autumn air, with the trail promising to loop back to my destination. As I drove along, a sense of unease began to creep in. Somewhere along the way, I must have taken a wrong turn. The shadows lengthened, and the temperature dropped, wrapping me in a growing sense of dread. I realized, with a sinking feeling, that I was lost. Then, the rain began in earnest, fat drops pelting through the canopy above. I pulled my lightweight jacket tighter around me, but it did little to ward off the chill that seeped in. My boots squelched in the quickly forming mud as I pressed on, hoping to find my way back to a familiar path. Thunder rumbled ominously in the distance, urging me to quicken my pace. The last thing I needed was to be caught in this unsettling night. As the storm raged outside, I rounded a bend in the trail and my heart leapt at the sight of a cabin. It stood small and weathered, its wooden walls a soft gray, telling tales of many seasons gone by. Shelter was all I sought, and there it was. I jogged towards it, relief washing over me as I reached the small porch. The door, surprisingly unlocked, creaked open at my touch. "Hello," I called out, not wanting to intrude if someone were inside. Silence enveloped me. I stepped inside, blinking as my eyes adjusted to the dim light. The cabin was sparse yet cozy, with a stone fireplace that seemed to beckon me closer. One wall was dominated by shadows, and in the corner, a small kitchenette lingered, untouched by time. A narrow staircase led up to what I imagined was a loft, its silence suggesting it hadn't been used in ages, a fine layer of dust cloaking every surface. I shrugged off my wet jacket, hanging it on a hook by the door. Outside, the storm intensified, the wind howling through the trees, and I felt a wave of gratitude for the solid walls that stood between me and the tempest. After a bit of searching, I discovered some dry firewood stacked near the fireplace. It took a few tries with my damp matches, but soon, a small fire flickered to life, casting dancing shadows around the room. As I settled by the fire, its warmth enveloped me like a comforting embrace, a welcome relief from the chill of the rain. Yet, an unsettling feeling lingered in the air. The cabin, a sanctuary in the storm, was curiously unlocked, and it bore the eerie signs of having been hastily abandoned. I tried to dismiss these thoughts, attributing them to an overactive imagination, perhaps stirred by too many horror tales. I was safe, dry, and could wait out the tempest. In the morning, I would find my way back to the world beyond these walls. But as night deepened, the storm raged on, the wind howling like a distant wail, and the shadows danced around me, whispering secrets of the night. Whistling drifted through the gaps in the cabin's walls, while tree branches scraped against the roof, evoking the unsettling sound of claws attempting to breach the shelter. In an effort to distract myself, I delved deeper into the cabin's secrets. In a drawer, I discovered an old journal, its pages yellowed and brittle, the handwriting faded with time. I could decipher only fragments. Day 3. The noises are growing louder. Something lurks beyond. Day 7. I saw it today. God help me, I saw it. Day 12. Sleep eludes me. It is always watching. As I read the entry, a shiver crept down my spine. If you're reading this, I thought you must leave. Leave now. I snapped the journal shut, my heart racing. Surely, it was just the ramblings of a paranoid hermit. I reassured myself, nothing to worry about. But then, a loud crack of thunder startled me, and the cabin was suddenly engulfed in darkness. The fire had gone out. I fumbled for my flashlight, its beam barely cutting through the thick shadows. As I moved to rekindle the fire, a sound outside froze me in my tracks. A low, guttural growl that was unmistakably not the wind. I held my breath, straining to listen. There it was again, closer this time. Then another sound, the unmistakable crunch of footsteps on the porch. My mind raced. Was it a bear? A mountain lion? Whatever it was, I didn't want to meet it. I backed away from the door, searching for something to defend myself with. The footsteps stopped right outside, and I could hear heavy breathing, snuffling at the crack beneath the door. My own breath came in short, panicked gasps. The door handle began to turn, slowly, deliberately. I raised my makeshift weapon, a fire poker, ready for whatever lay beyond. As I stood beside the fireplace, a sense of determination filled me, ready to confront whatever lay beyond that door. Yet, the door remained still, the handle ceasing its movement, and I heard the footsteps retreating into the distance. A wave of relief washed over me, but it was fleeting. Soon, a new sound crept into my awareness, Something was scaling the side of the cabin. I could hear the claws scraping against the wood, drawing closer to the window. I instinctively backed into a corner, my gaze locked on the window, when suddenly, a shadow flitted by, momentarily obscuring the meager moonlight that struggled to penetrate the storm. As the clouds gathered, I caught a glimpse of something unsettling. A face pressed against the glass. Yet, it was far from human. Its eyes glowed an eerie yellow, piercing through the darkness. The features twisted into a nightmarish visage, and I felt a primal fear wash over me, unlike anything I had ever known. It vanished as swiftly as it had come, but I could still hear it moving around outside, circling the cabin. I was trapped, with only a flimsy wooden structure standing between me and that unknown terror. Hours slipped by in this tense stillness, as I huddled in the shadows. In the dim light of the early morning, I found myself cornered, jumping at every sound. The creature, for lack of a better word, seemed content to wait me out, occasionally scratching at the walls or letting out a low growl, a reminder of its presence. As the first light of dawn began to filter through the windows, the noises outside finally ceased. I waited, hardly daring to breathe, but there was nothing but silence. Slowly, cautiously, I approached the door. My hand shook as I reached for the handle. Taking a deep breath to steady myself, I yanked the door open. The porch was empty, and the forest beyond lay still. It was a quiet, peaceful moment, as if the terrors of the night had faded into nothing more than a bad dream. Yet, the deep claw marks etched into the wooden railing whispered a different tale. I felt no inclination to linger, uncertain if the creature might return. With my still damp jacket in hand, I set off down the trail, my legs urging me onward as swiftly as they could. The right path was a mystery to me, but in that moment it mattered little. My only desire was to distance myself from that cabin. It was mid-afternoon when I finally stumbled upon a road, greeted by the sight of a passing motorist. They took pity on me, offering a ride to the nearest town. I must have looked quite a sight, muddy, disheveled, with wild eyes and an even wilder story. The local sheriff listened patiently as I recounted my experience, but I could sense the skepticism lurking behind his gaze. He promised to send someone to check out the cabin, yet his tone suggested he didn't expect to find anything. Later, as I sat in a diner waiting for a friend to pick me up, I couldn't shake the haunting memory of those glowing eyes and that inhuman face. I knew what I had seen, what I had truly witnessed, experienced even if no one else believed me. I glanced out the window towards the forest looming in the distance. For a moment, I could have sworn I saw a shadow move between the trees, a pair of yellow eyes gleaming in the darkness. But when I blinked, it was gone. I turned back to my coffee, my hands shaking slightly as I raised the cup to my lips. I knew one thing for certain. I would never set foot in those woods again. Some mysteries are better left unsolved. Some creatures better left undiscovered. As I left the diner, the journal eyed, in the stillness of the night, I felt the weight of the object I had found in the cabin pressing against me, its warning reverberating in my thoughts. If you're reading this, get out now. I had escaped, yet an unsettling sense lingered, whispering that it was far from over. The shadows of the woods seemed to promise that the entity lurking within would seek me out once more. As I settled into my friend's car, I cast one last, lingering look at the darkened forest, a silent vow forming in my heart. I would be prepared for the next encounter, for deep within, I sensed that the creature had caught my scent, and it was only a matter of time before it returned. As the trees faded into the distance behind me, the memory of that night in the cabin lingered, etched in my mind forever. It served as a haunting reminder that the most frightening entities are not always the figments of our imagination lurking in the shadows, but rather the very real threats that lie just beyond the flickering glow of our campfires, patiently observing, biding their time. I had never anticipated a struggle for my own sanctuary, yet there I stood, locked in a gaze with a stranger who insisted that my home belonged to him, and I understood the gravity of that night would end in either triumph or terror. It had been a long day at work, the kind where everything that could go wrong did. I was looking forward to nothing more than a hot shower, a glass of wine, and mindless TV before bed. As I turned the key in my front door lock, I was already mentally picking out which comfy pajamas I'd wear. The door swung open, and I stepped inside, kicking off my heels with a sigh of relief. That's when I noticed something off. There was a jacket I didn't recognize draped over the back of couch, and was that the smell of cooking wafting from my kitchen? My heart began to race. Had someone broken in? Should I call the police? Before I could decide, a man emerged from my kitchen, a dish towel casually slung over his shoulder. "Oh, hey there," he said, as if we were old friends. "You must be the previous tenant. Did you forget something?" I stood there, frozen in shock. Previous tenant? What was he talking about? "Excuse me," I managed to say, my voice trembling more than I would have liked. "But who are you, and what are you doing in my—" In the dim light of the room, the man's friendly smile wavered for just a heartbeat. "Your house?" he echoed, a hint of disbelief creeping into his voice. "I think there's been some misunderstanding. I just moved in today. The landlord handed me the keys this very morning." A sense of surrealism washed over me, as if I had stumbled into a strange dream. "That's impossible," he replied, shaking his head, concern etched on his face. "I own this house. I've lived here for 3 years." His words hung in the air, heavy with tension. "Now look, I'm sorry, but I think you've made a mistake. I have a signed lease right here." He moved toward the coffee table, retrieving a folder and extracting a document. I approached cautiously, my mind racing with uncertainty. As I stood there, a sense of disbelief washed over me. This had to be some kind of trick, I thought. But when I glanced at the paper he held out, my heart sank. It appeared to be a genuine lease agreement, dated today, with the name James Thompson and my address printed clearly. "This isn't right," I said, my voice steadying with a mix of confusion and anger. "I never rented this place out. I own it. There must be some mistake." James ran a hand through his hair, his frustration evident. "Listen, I don't know what's going on here, but I paid a deposit and first month's rent. I have a legal right to be here." I reached for my own documents, feeling the weight of the situation settle in the air around us. "Phone, I'm calling the police." "This is ridiculous," I exclaimed, my voice tinged with urgency. "Wait," James said, raising his hands in a calming gesture. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Why don't we call the landlord and sort this out?" I hesitated, torn between the instinct to dial 911 immediately and the fear of appearing foolish if this turned out to be a simple misunderstanding. "Fine," I finally conceded. "Let's call the landlord. But I'm telling you, there is no landlord. I own this house." James nodded, pulling out his phone. He scrolled through his contacts and hit dial, placing the phone on speaker. After a few rings, a gruff voice answered. "Yeah, Mr. Athanerson. This is James Thompson, the new tenant at 1242 Elm Street. There seems to be some confusion. The previous owner is here and says she never rented out the house." My jaw dropped as I recognized that voice. It belonged to my sleazy neighbor, Bob Athanerson, who had been trying to get me to sell my house to him for months. "Oh, must be a misunderstanding," Bob stammered. "Don't worry about it, James. She probably just forgot she rented it out. You've got a legal lease, so you're in the clear." Bob snatched the phone from James's hand. "What the hell do you think you're doing? You know damn well I didn't rent out my house." There was a pause, then a click as Bob hung up. I stared at the phone in disbelief, then turned to James, who looked just as confused as I felt. "Look," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I don't know what's going on here, but I can prove this is my house. I have the deed, tax documents, everything." James held up his hands. "Hey, I'm just as confused as you are. I answered an ad online and met with Mr. This morning, Ethan signed the lease and received the keys. All day, I've been moving in, my thoughts swirling like shadows in the night. As I approached the bookshelf, where I kept my important documents, a nagging suspicion crept in. Could this be some elaborate trick by Bob? But why? How had he managed to get keys to my house? As I reached for the folder containing my house documents, something felt amiss. Several of my beloved books were missing, replaced by unfamiliar titles. I yanked open the drawer of the side table, only to find my spare keys absent. A chill slithered down my spine. It was clear. Someone had been in my house, methodically replacing my things with someone else's. How long had this been going on? I turned back to James, who was watching me with a mix of concern and weariness. "We need to call the real police," I said right now. He nodded slowly. "Okay, but I'm telling you I had no idea about any of this. I'm as much a victim here as you are." I wanted to believe him, but at this point I didn't know what to think. I dialed 911 and quickly explained the situation. They said they'd sent someone over right away. While we waited, I paced the living room as I pointed out to James all the things that were mine, all the changes I'd made to the house over the years. He listened quietly, his brow furrowed in thought. After a moment, he finally spoke, his voice steady. "I have to ask," he said. "Is there any chance you might have, I don't know, forgotten renting this place out? Maybe due to stress?" I shot him a glare that could have melted steel. "No, absolutely not. I would never rent out my home, especially not to a stranger, and especially not through my creep of a neighbor." James held up his hands in surrender. Okay, I'm just trying to." The sound of a car pulling up outside caught our attention, and we both turned toward the window. It wasn't a police cruiser. It was Bob's beat-up pickup truck. A wave of unease washed over me as I muttered, "Oh hell no," and stormed toward the door. I yanked it open just as Bob was about to knock, and he stumbled back, surprise and guilt flashing across his face. "Oh, hey there," he stammered. "I was just coming to check on things." I cut him off sharply. "Cut the crap, Bob. What the hell do you think you're doing? How did you get keys to my house? And why are you pretending to be a landlord?" Bob's eyes flickered between me and James, who had taken his place behind me. He nervously licked his lips. Now, let's not get all worked up. I'm sure we can work this out." "Work what out?" I demanded. "The fact that you've apparently been sneaking into my house and replacing my things? That you forged rental documents? That's breaking and entering, fraud, and God knows what else." Bob's nervous smile vanished, replaced by a scowl. "You should have just sold me the damn house when I offered," he said, his voice low and tense. In the dim light of the room, I found myself grappling with the weight of the revelation. The audacity of it all left me momentarily speechless. James, his voice a whisper from behind, broke the silence, questioning the very foundation of what we thought we knew. "So you're saying the lease isn't real? That this is all some scheme to force her out of her own home?" Bob, with a casual shrug, painted a chilling picture. "It would have worked if she hadn't come home early. A few more days, and all her belongings would have vanished, replaced with yours. She'd have looked mad trying to claim it was her house." The gravity of his words settled over me like a heavy fog, a violation of trust that felt almost surreal. In that moment, a wave of emotion washed over me, and I felt the sting of tears threatening to spill. The piercing wail of a police siren sliced through the stillness of the night, causing Bob's complexion to drain of color. "You called the cops?" he stammered, disbelief etched across his face. "Of course I did," I retorted, my voice rising in frustration. As the police cruiser arrived, I noticed the fight leave Bob. His shoulders sagged, and he appeared utterly spent. The hours that followed blurred together, filled with police inquiries, the gathering of evidence, and curious neighbors emerging from their homes, drawn by the disturbance. James, meanwhile, was filled with remorse, horrified to discover the extent of what had transpired. As an unsuspecting pawn in Bob's scheme, I surrendered the keys and lease without a word, watching as the police led him away in handcuffs. Standing on my porch, my home felt suddenly altered, as if it had been touched by an unwelcome presence. I understood it would take time to reclaim a sense of safety here. James approached, his demeanor sheepish. "I'm so sorry about all this. I had no idea," he said. I nodded, too weary to harbor anger towards him any longer. "I know it's not your fault." He hesitated, then offered, "You know, my lease on my old place isn't up yet. If you wanted, you could stay there. For a moment, I lingered in the stillness, allowing the weight of the offer to settle within me. Gratitude washed over me, and I considered the possibility of accepting it. As James departed and the police finally cleared out, I stepped back into my house. It was undeniably mine, yet it lacked the warmth of home, at least for now. I surveyed the mingling of my belongings with James's, the subtle reminders of Bob's unwelcome presence. I poured myself that longed for glass of wine, a desire that felt distant now. With each sip, I made a quiet vow to reclaim the comfort that had slipped away. In the stillness of the night, I resolved to reclaim my home, to restore my sense of safety. It wouldn't be an easy path, but I was stronger than Bob had anticipated. After all, home is not merely a location. It embodies a feeling of security and belonging. I would be damned if I allowed anyone to strip that away from me. The old warehouse stood before me, a dark silhouette against the starry sky. I had faced this task countless times, yet tonight carried an unsettling air. If only I had heeded that persistent whisper in my gut, perhaps I could have changed the course of the evening. As the clock approached midnight, I found myself stepping into the familiar shadows of the warehouse, a place that had become my second home over the past 5 years. My name is James, and while my role as a night security guard may not be the most thrilling, it offers a steady paycheck and ample time to nurture my writing ambitions. I often remind myself of this as I settle in for another long, solitary shift. This particular night began like any other, with a thermos of coffee cradled in my hands, ready to face the stillness of the vast, labyrinthine storage units that surrounded me, each one holding its own secrets and whispers of the past. During the day, the inventory bustled with activity, but as night fell, it transformed into my realm of silence. I began my first round, checking doors and windows, ensuring everything was secure. The beam of my flashlight sliced through the darkness, casting long shadows that appeared to dance and twist with each step. I had long since grown accustomed to the creaks and groans of the old building settling, yet tonight, every sound felt amplified. It was around 2 a.m. As I settled into the quiet of the night, a faint noise broke through the steady hum of the ventilation system. I paused, straining my ears, and there it was again, a muffled thud, followed by what seemed like whispered voices. My heart began to race. In 5 years, I had never faced anything more perilous than a raccoon that had somehow found its way inside. But this felt different. This felt human. I reached for my radio, poised to call it in, but hesitated. What if it was nothing? I would appear foolish for summoning the authorities over a mere figment of my imagination. No, I decided I would investigate myself. At first, I moved quietly through the warehouse, my senses heightened, attuned to the faintest sounds. The noise drifted from the back, near the loading docks. As I approached, the whispers grew clearer, 2, perhaps 3 voices, speaking in urgent, hushed tones. I pressed myself against a stack of crates, inching closer to peek around the corner. What I saw sent a chill through me. 3 men huddled around the back of a van, its doors wide open, unloading something large, heavy-looking duffel bags. One of them gripped a gun tightly. I pulled back, my mind racing. My heart raced, a sensation that felt far beyond my control. I knew I had to call the police, and quickly. But as I reached for my radio, my elbow brushed against one of the crates. The sound, though seemingly minor, reverberated through the stillness of the warehouse like a thunderclap. The whispers ceased instantly. "What was that?" one of the men hissed, while another commanded, "Check it out." I could hear footsteps drawing nearer to my hiding place, and panic surged within me. Retreating was no longer an option. They would surely spot me. My only choice was to delve deeper into the shadows of the warehouse. I took off running, urgency eclipsing all other thoughts. In the stillness of the night, a sense of urgency enveloped me as I heard shouts and the echo of footsteps drawing near. I navigated the labyrinth of shelves and crates, my heart racing like a drum in my chest. Familiarity with the warehouse layout was my only ally, yet the odds were stacked against me with their numbers and weapons. I needed a sanctuary, a moment to gather my thoughts. Then, I caught sight of a stack of empty wooden pallets and slipped behind them, striving to steady my uneven breaths. The footsteps approached, the beams of flashlights dancing across the floor. "He's got to be here somewhere," one of the men growled, the tension thick in the air. "Find him." I closed my eyes, hoping for a moment of silence amidst the chaos. My eyes strained to will myself into invisibility as the footsteps halted near my hiding place. I could hear the man's heavy breathing, and the acrid scent of cigarette smoke clung to him like a shadow. For a heart-stopping moment, I feared he had spotted me. But then the footsteps faded into the distance. I released a shaky breath, feeling a fleeting sense of safety wash over me. Yet, I knew I couldn't linger here forever. I needed to reach a phone to call for help. Slowly and carefully, I peered out from behind the pallets. The coast appeared clear, and I began to creep out, moving as quietly as I could. With the stillness of the night enveloping me, I moved as quietly as I could toward the office area. If I could just reach that landline, I could call for help. Halfway there, a voice pierced the silence. "There he is!" In an instant, I broke into a sprint, abandoning all thoughts of stealth. I could hear footsteps behind me, gaining ground with each passing moment. The office door loomed just ahead. If I could reach it and lock myself inside. But then, something struck me hard from behind, sending me sprawling to the cold, unforgiving concrete floor. The impact knocked the breath from my lungs, and rough hands seized me, pulling me back into the shadows of the night. As I found myself face to face with one of the men, his eyes glinted cold and hard in the dim light. Well, he sneered. "What do we have here? A little rat who doesn't know how to mind his own business." I struggled against his grip, but it was futile. The other two men emerged, one of them aiming his gun at me. "What should we do with him?" the one holding me inquired. The man with the gun stepped forward, his expression unyielding. "We can't leave any witnesses." A chill coursed through me. This was it. I was going to die here in this forsaken warehouse. One might wonder what transpired in that moment. But then, like a whisper in the night, I heard the distant wail of police sirens. The men around me froze, their eyes wide with panic as they exchanged frantic glances. One of them began to speak, but then it struck me. I had my radio. In the chaos, I must have inadvertently pressed the panic button. Help was on the way. The man who held me cursed under his breath, shoving me roughly to the ground. "We've got to get out of here," he shouted. And in an instant, they were off, sprinting toward their van, leaving me alone on the cold concrete floor. A wave of relief washed over me, and I fought back tears. Moments later, the warehouse was alive with the presence of police. I recounted my story, still trembling from the ordeal. Shaking from the adrenaline, the officers praised my quick thinking with the panic button. Yet all I could think about was how close I had come to disaster. As dawn broke, I sat in the back of an ambulance, a shock blanket draped over my shoulders. The police had caught two of the men trying to flee in their van, while the third remained at large, but they assured me they would find him. I watched as officers carried out the duffel bags, their contents confirming my worst fears. Drugs, weapons, cash. It was a major bust. One of the detectives, he approached me, a grim smile etched on his face. "You did good tonight, son," he said. "You stumbled onto something big. A drug trafficking operation we've been trying to crack for months." I nodded numbly, still trying to process everything that had unfolded. "We'll need you to come down to the station later to give a full statement," he continued. "And, well, you might want to consider finding a new job. These guys have connections. It might not be safe for you here anymore." The weight of his words settled heavily upon me, and I realized my life as I knew it was about to change forever. As I contemplated the need to start anew, moving away from the shadows of my past, I found myself drawn to the beauty of the sunrise spilling over the warehouse. The light stretched long shadows across the parking lot, and in that moment, a realization washed over me. For the first time in years, I felt a spark of life within me. The dull rhythm of my nightly existence had been disrupted, replaced by an exhilarating adventure that seemed to leap from the pages of the stories I longed to write. I turned to the detective beside me, a small smile tugging at my lips, and said, "You know, I think I might have." As I discovered my new career path, he raised an eyebrow, and I nodded in response. "How does one become a private investigator?" I asked. The detective chuckled softly, shaking his head. "One step at a time, kid. One step at a time." As I was driven away from the warehouse for the last time, a blend of fear and excitement coursed through me, signaling the end of my mundane nights as a security guard. A new chapter was just beginning, and this time I would be the author of my own story. The warehouse faded into the rearview mirror, but the memory of that night lingered, casting a shadow over the path ahead. It was a night that would linger in my memory, a night that transformed the mundane into the extraordinary. As I settled in, the flickering lights hinted at the impending change, and I sensed that this stormy evening would be unlike any other. The darkness crept in, wrapping my home in an unsettling embrace, heralding a terror I had yet to fathom. I had been nestled on the couch, lost in the pages of a thrilling tale, when the tempest began to rage outside, rain lashing against the windows, setting the stage for what was to come. Against the windows, the wind howled through the trees outside. It was the kind of night that made one grateful for the comfort of four walls and a roof. The power had been flickering on and off all evening, so when it finally gave out completely, I wasn't surprised. I set my book aside with a sigh and fumbled for my phone, using its dim light to navigate to the kitchen where I kept my emergency candles. As I rummaged through drawers looking for matches, a loud thump from downstairs made me freeze. My house was old, full of creaks and groans filled the air, yet this was unlike any other sound. It felt deliberate. I held my breath, listening intently. For a moment, all I could hear was the relentless pounding of rain on the roof. Then, unmistakably, the sound of footsteps echoed through the stillness. My heart leapt into my throat. Someone was in the house. I clutched my phone tighter, my mind racing. Should I call the police? But what if it was just my imagination? I would feel foolish calling 911 over a case of storm-induced paranoia. Another creak, closer this time. Whoever it was, they were at the bottom of the stairs. The stillness of the night, I found myself at the top of the stairs, heart racing. My bedroom lay just down the hall, but the open space loomed before me like a shadowy abyss. If the intruder glanced up at the wrong moment, I knew my fate could be sealed. The decision was thrust upon me as I heard the first stair creak under their weight. They were coming. With a swift breath, I darted across the hallway, hoping the storm outside would cloak any sound I made. I slipped into my bedroom, easing the door shut, battling the urge to slam it and betray my hiding place. My hands trembled as I fumbled to unlock my phone, desperate to call for help, but in that moment, the world outside felt impossibly distant. My heart raced as I realized I must have turned it off. The startup screen glowed mockingly, taking an eternity to load. I could hear the footsteps on the landing now, slow and deliberate. They paused, and I held my breath, certain that whoever it was could hear my thundering heartbeat. A floorboard creaked right outside my door. I backed away, looking wildly around for a weapon, anything I could use to defend myself. My eyes fell on the heavy lamp on my bedside table. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. I unplugged the lamp, gripping it tightly as I positioned myself for what might come next. Myself hidden behind the door, I knew that if they entered, I would have but one fleeting chance to catch them off guard. The door handle turned slowly, the latch clicking softly as it released. Time seemed to stretch, each second heavy with anticipation. As the door creaked open, a shadow fell across the floor, elongated and distorted in the dim light filtering through the window. I raised the lamp, every muscle in my body coiled tight like a spring. The intruder stepped into the room, and in that heartbeat, I swung the lamp with all my strength. There was a sickening thud followed by a cry of pain. The figure stumbled, and I seized that precious moment to shove past them, bolting for freedom. As I hurried down the stairs, I took them two at a time, nearly losing my balance in my urgency. Behind me, The angry shouts and the thunderous sound of pursuit echoed in the dimness. I reached the bottom and made my way to the front door, my fingers fumbling with the lock as precious seconds slipped away. Just as I managed to turn the deadbolt, a hand suddenly grabbed my shoulder, yanking me backward. I let out a scream, fueled more by fury than fear, and swung my elbow back with all my might. It connected with something solid, and the grip on my shoulder loosened. With determination, I wrenched the door open. As I stepped outside, the storm unleashed its fury, rain drenching my clothes in an instant. I dashed down the driveway, my mind a blank canvas, with no plan or destination, just the rhythm of my bare feet slapping against the slick pavement. The small stones dug into my soles, but the pain was a distant whisper in the chaos. A fleeting glance over my shoulder revealed a figure framed in my doorway, pausing for a heartbeat before pursuing me. With a surge of adrenaline, I rounded the corner onto Main Street, hoping that one of my neighbors would be home, ready to offer a helping hand if only I could reach them in time. As I hurried towards the nearest house, I pounded on the door, my voice barely rising above the howling wind. "Help!" I cried, desperation creeping into my tone. But the house stood dark and silent, unyielding to my pleas. I moved on to the next, and then the next, each unanswered door deepening my sense of urgency. Where was everyone? The sound of running footsteps urged me forward, though I couldn't discern how close my pursuer was. The storm twisted the sounds around me, making it impossible to gauge the distance. Just as I reached the end of the street, a glimmer of hope caught my eye. The Thompsons' house, standing there like a beacon in the tempest. The soft glow of light from the upstairs window, a sign that someone was indeed home. I hurried towards the house, my breath quickening, each step feeling heavier. Just a little further, I urged myself, reaching the halfway point of the driveway when an unexpected force struck me from behind, sending me crashing onto the damp grass. As I rolled over, I glimpsed my assailant, their features shrouded in darkness. Panic surged through me, and I shouted, kicking out in desperation. My foot found its mark against their knee, and they staggered back with a muffled grunt. I quickly regained my footing, adrenaline coursing through me, ready to flee once more when suddenly, the area was illuminated with a bright light. The Thompsons' porch light flickered to life, casting a warm glow over the scene. "What's going on out here?" a gruff voice called, pulling my attention. There stood Mr. Thompson, a baseball bat gripped tightly in his hand. A wave of relief washed over me. "Please," I gasped, "help me. This person broke into my house. They're trying to—" My words faltered as I turned back to face my attacker. In the light from the porch, their face became clear. It was my neighbor, Ted. "Olivia," he said, confusion etched on his features. "What are you talking about? I heard you screaming and came to check on you." I stared at him, bewildered. My mind wrestled with the unsettling thoughts that swirled around me, grappling with the new information. The noises echoed through the stillness, suggesting someone was in my house. Ted shook his head, his expression calm yet firm. "I didn't see anyone," he said. "Your front door was wide open, and I could hear you yelling from down the street." Mr. Thompson stepped down from his porch, still gripping his bat, concern etched on his face. "Is everything all right?" he asked. I opened my mouth to explain, but the words faltered, caught in the web of confusion that enveloped me. How could I articulate what had transpired when I was no longer certain of it myself? "I thought someone had broken in," I finally managed to say. "I heard noises. It's an old neighborhood," Mr. Thompson replied, his voice steady, as if to soothe the unease that lingered in the air. "These houses, you see, have a way of whispering secrets, especially on stormy nights like this. Are you certain it wasn't merely the wind?" I felt a surge of protest rising within me, a need to assert that what I had heard was undeniably real. Yet, doubt began to weave its way into my thoughts. Had I conjured it all in my mind? Had my fear transformed the creaking floorboards into something sinister? "Maybe," I replied, my voice tinged with uncertainty. "I don't know anymore." Ted placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. Come on, let's get you back home. You're soaked to the bone. As we made our way back, an unsettling feeling lingered, as if something important was just out of reach. Fear had enveloped me, its grip so tangible, the threat so pressing. How could it all have been a mere figment of my imagination? We arrived at my front door, still ajar, a gateway for my frantic escape. Ted, ever the cautious friend, insisted on checking the house for any lingering shadows. I stood on the porch, shivering in my damp clothes, as he moved through the rooms, his footsteps echoing in the silence. When he returned, he reassured me, all clear, with no sign of anyone lurking in the corners. I nodded, a blend of relief and embarrassment washing over me. Thank you, and I'm sorry for, well, attacking you. Ted chuckled softly. No harm done. You've got quite an arm on you. That lamp really packs a punch. With a gentle sigh, I managed a weak smile, thinking to myself, I'm never going to live this down, am I? Ah, don't worry about it, Ted said, his voice soothing. We've all had moments where our imagination gets the better of us. Get some rest. Things will look better in the morning. After Ted left, I locked the door securely and made my way upstairs to change into dry clothes. As I passed the spot where I had struck Ted with the lamp, something caught my eye. There, on the hardwood floor, was a muddy footprint, a large one, much bigger than my own, and it was facing towards my bedroom. As I stepped back, a chill crept down my spine, the realization settling in like a heavy fog. There had been someone in my house, and they lingered somewhere beyond the walls. I grasped my fully charged phone, dialing 911 with trembling fingers. While I waited for the operator's voice to break the silence, my gaze fixated on the muddy footprint, a haunting reminder that the monsters we dread can sometimes walk among us. The storm outside raged on, yet it felt distant, overshadowed by the unsettling truth that someone had invaded my sanctuary this very night. Something whispered to me that they wouldn't relent so easily, whatever their intentions might have been. A sense lingered that this was far from concluded. As I recounted my experience to the police, the image of that shadowy figure in my doorway haunted me. Who were they? What did they seek? And most crucially, when would they return? One thing was clear. I would be sleeping with the lights on for quite some time. I replayed that moment endlessly, telling myself I should never have stopped. But when I saw him standing there, it all became too real. In the pouring rain, I found myself with my thumb out, a picture of desperation. Little did I know that this simple act of kindness would lead to the most terrifying night of my life. The windshield wipers struggled against the relentless downpour as I navigated the winding country road. It was well past midnight, and fatigue weighed heavily on me after a long day of meetings in the city. Just another hour of driving, and I would be in the comfort of my own bed. That's when I spotted him, a solitary figure standing by the roadside, momentarily illuminated by my headlights. He was soaked to the bone, his clothes clinging to him like a second skin. As I drew nearer, I noticed he was trying to hitchhike, his thumb extended in a hopeful gesture. I hesitated. Every instinct urged me to keep driving. It was late, I was alone, and picking up strangers was never a wise choice. Yet, something in the desperation of his posture compelled me to slow down. I pulled over, rolling down the passenger side window just a crack. "You okay?" I called out over the sound of the rain. He jogged over, a look of relief washing over his face. "Thank God," he said. His voice was a whisper, nearly lost in the howling storm. My car had broken down a few miles back, and I had been walking for what felt like hours. I took a moment to study him. He appeared harmless enough, perhaps in his mid-30s, with a kind face and weary eyes. Against my better judgment, I unlocked the door. "Hop in," I said. "Where are you headed?" He slid into the passenger seat, water dripping from his clothes onto the upholstery. "Just to the next town," he replied. "There's a motel there where I can stay for the night." I nodded and pulled back onto the road. "I'm Jake," I said, feeling the weight of the night settle around us. One should at least know the name of the man I had invited into my car. "Mike," he replied with a grateful smile. Thanks for stopping. I was starting to think I'd be out here all night. We drove in silence for a few minutes, the only sounds being the rhythmic swish of the wipers and the drumming of rain on the roof. I stole glances at James from the corner of my eye. He was staring out the window, his expression unreadable in the darkness. To ease the tension, I ventured, "What brings you out this way?" James turned to look at me, and in a fleeting moment, I caught a glimpse of something in his eyes that sent a chill through my veins, but it vanished just as swiftly, leaving me to wonder if I had conjured it from my imagination. "Oh," he remarked nonchalantly, "just passing through. What about you? You live around here?" I paused, suddenly conscious of the details I was revealing to this unfamiliar face. Yeah, about an hour up the road." James nodded, his gaze unwavering. "Must be nice living out in the country like this. Peaceful, quiet." There was an unsettling quality in his tone that made the hairs on my neck prickle, and I instinctively tightened my grip As I gripped the steering wheel, a creeping sense of unease began to settle in. "It's nice," I said, my gaze fixed on the road ahead. "Look, there's a gas station coming up. Maybe we should stop and see if they can help with your car." Suddenly, James's hands shot out, gripping my arm with an intensity that sent a chill down my spine. "No," he said, his voice taking on a hard edge. "Keep driving." I stole a glance at him, my heart racing as the kind, weary traveler I once knew vanished, replaced by someone else entirely. His eyes were cold, his jaw set in a harsh line. "I think you should let me out," I said, striving to keep my voice steady. He laughed, a sound that echoed ominously in the quiet of the night. In the stillness of the night, a tension hung in the air, heavy and palpable. "I don't think so, Jake," he said, his tone devoid of any humor. "We're going to keep driving, and you're going to take me exactly where I want to go." My mind raced, searching for an escape from this chilling predicament. Stopping the car seemed reckless. The rain blurred the road, and a crash was all but certain. Overpowering him was another thought, but the uncertainty of his potential weapon loomed large. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice betraying a tremor I wished to hide. James smiled, a grin that sent shivers down my spine, and it was the most terrifying sight I had ever encountered. "What do I want?" "Oh, Jake, I want everything." With that, he reached into his jacket, and the night grew darker still. As the tension thickened in the air, he revealed a knife, its blade catching the faint glow from the dashboard. "First, I want your wallet," he said, his voice steady. "Then your phone, and after that, we'll take a little trip to your house. I bet a guy like you has some nice things." My heart sank. He knew where I lived, or at least he was close enough to guess. I needed to think quickly. "Okay," I replied, striving to keep my voice steady. "My wallet's in my back pocket. Let me pull over and I'll get it for you." But James tightened his grip on the knife, his tone unyielding. "Nice try. Keep driving." He leaned over, his free hand reaching around to my back pocket. In that fleeting moment of distraction, I seized my chance. I slammed on the brakes, and we both lurched forward, James's head striking the dashboard with a sickening thud. Before he could regain his composure, I shifted the car into park and lunged for the knife. We grappled in the confined space, the knife between us like a perilous game of tug-of-war. I could feel the blade nicking my hand, but the rush of adrenaline dulled the pain. With a final surge of strength, I wrenched the knife from his grasp and hurled it away. In the back seat, James erupted with fury, his hands now liberated to unleash a flurry of wild, angry blows. I instinctively raised my arms to shield my face, my other hand desperately seeking the door handle. At last, I found it and flung the door open, tumbling out onto the slick, wet asphalt. James was right behind me, grasping at my legs as I scrambled to escape. The rain poured down in sheets, turning the ground into a treacherous surface. I lost my footing and fell, James's weight crashing down upon me as we rolled on the ground, each of us struggling for control. In the midst of a fierce struggle, my hand found something hard and cold, a rock. Without a moment's thought, I swung it with all my strength. A sickening crack echoed in the night, and suddenly James's weight was gone. I scrambled to my feet, panting and disoriented. As I looked down to see him lying on the ground, unmoving, blood mingled with the rain, creating pink rivulets across the asphalt. For a heart-stopping moment, I feared I had taken his life. Then, a groan escaped him, and he stirred slightly. Relief and fear warred within me. He was alive, but for how long? What would unfold when he regained consciousness? I turned and ran back into the shadows. My hands trembled so violently that inserting the key into the ignition felt like an impossible task. As I pulled away, I caught a glimpse of James in my rearview mirror, slowly rising to a sitting position. I pressed the accelerator harder than I ever had, disregarding the rain and the slick roads, consumed by the urgent need to distance myself from him. When the lights of the next town finally appeared, a wave of relief washed over me. I veered into the police station parking lot, my car barely in park before I was out and running. As I sat there, the hours slipped by in a haze of police inquiries and statements. They dispatched patrols to search for Mick, yet the storm had obscured much of the evidence. They promised me they would continue the search, that they would find him. Wrapped in a shock blanket, cradling a cup of lukewarm coffee that trembled in my hands, an unsettling feeling lingered in the air. Felt as though this was far from over. My mind was still out there, lurking in the shadows, knowing more about me than I was willing to confront. As dawn broke, a pale light began to seep into the room, hinting at the mysteries yet to unfold. In the rain-soaked town, a decision weighed heavily upon me. I realized I couldn't go home. Not yet, perhaps not ever. James had stolen more than just my sense of safety. He had taken my ability to trust, my belief in the goodness of strangers. I called my boss, requesting some time off, and then I checked into a motel under a false name, paying in cash as I sought refuge. As I lay on the lumpy motel bed, my gaze fixed on the water-stained ceiling, I pondered how swiftly life can shift, how one moment of misplaced kindness, one fleeting second, can alter everything. The decision came swiftly, and in an instant, my world was turned upside down. Uncertainty loomed over me. Would they ever catch James? Would I ever feel secure enough to pick up a hitchhiker again? One thing became clear. The next time I spotted someone on the roadside, thumb out and looking desperate, I would drive on, regardless of how heavy the rain fell. The moment I opened my hotel room door and found a stranger rummaging through my suitcase, I understood that this was not the peaceful business trip I had envisioned. What I didn't yet realize was that, as I returned from a long day of meetings, my feet ached in those too tight dress shoes, and my mind felt fuzzy from hours of PowerPoint presentations. All I craved was a hot shower and the comfort of my bed. But as I swiped my key card and pushed open the door, I was jolted awake by an unsettling sight. There, in my room, stood a man, likely in his mid-30s, hovering over my open suitcase, my clothes scattered across the bed. He looked up as I entered, surprise flickering across his face before it vanished into something else entirely. Replaced by an unconvincing smile, he greeted me with a surprisingly calm voice. "Oh, hello," he said. "There must be some mistake. This is my room." I stood frozen in the doorway, my mind struggling to process what was happening. "Your room," I managed to stammer. "No, this is my room, 304. I checked in this morning." The man's smile never wavered, but I noticed his eyes darting towards the door behind me. "I see the confusion," he continued. "I just checked in an hour ago. The front desk must have made a mistake. Why don't we go down together and sort this out?" The instinct within me was a quiet alarm, whispering that something was amiss. This man was weaving a tale, and it was evident. But the question lingered, why? More pressing was the mystery of his presence in my room. I took a cautious step back, my hands still gripping the door handle. "I think I'll call the front desk from here," I said, striving to keep my voice steady. For a fleeting moment, his smile wavered. "No need for that," he replied hastily, producing a key card that mirrored my own. My heart raced. How had he obtained a key to my sanctuary? Was he in league with someone at the front desk? In that moment, I realized I had to escape, to seek help. I mustered a smile, though it felt forced, and suggested we go down together to resolve the situation. As I stepped back into the hallway, I anticipated his follow, but instead, he lunged at me, pushing me hard. I stumbled, my back colliding with the wall of the corridor. Before I could regain my footing, he dashed out the door, racing towards the elevators. Without a second thought, I chased after him, shouting for security. He reached the elevators, frantically pressing the call button, but fortune favored me. The doors remained stubbornly closed. He glanced back at me, then at the stairwell door beside the elevators. In a moment of urgency, he pushed through the door and began his descent. I hurried after him, my dress shoes slipping on the cold concrete steps. His footsteps echoed below, growing fainter as he distanced himself from me. When I finally reached the ground floor, I spotted him dashing across the lobby toward the main entrance. The night clerk, a young man just starting out, looked up, startled by the sudden commotion. "Stop that man," I shouted. "He was in my room." His teens looked bewildered as he made a half-hearted attempt to step in front of the intruder, but the man easily dodged around him and burst out into the night. I ran out after him, the cool night air a shock after the stuffy stairwell. I looked left and right, but the street was empty. He was gone. Panting, I turned back to the hotel. The clerk was standing in the doorway, looking concerned and confused. "What happened?" he asked as I approached. "Who was that man?" I shook my head, still trying to catch my breath. "I don't know. I found him in my room." As I rummaged through my belongings, I realized he had a key, somehow. The clerk's eyes widened in disbelief. "That's impossible. We never give out duplicate keys," he stammered. But there it was, a key in his possession. My fear morphed into anger as I thought of what had just transpired. Now he was gone, likely with half of my things. The clerk, increasingly distressed, ushered me inside. "Let's call the police," he suggested, "and I'll get the manager." The next hour unfolded in a haze of police statements and questions from the hotel staff. Yes, I was certain it was my room. No, I had never seen the man before. Yes, he definitely had a key card. The police arrived, and the unsettling reality of the situation began to sink in. I searched my room, but there were no signs of forced entry. My suitcase lay in disarray, yet, as far as I could tell, nothing was missing. Not even my laptop or the cash I had foolishly left in my bag. It didn't make sense. I told the detective who was taking my statement. Why go through all that trouble if he wasn't going to steal anything? The detective, a weary-looking woman in her 50s, shrugged. Could be he was looking for something specific and didn't find it, or maybe you interrupted him before he could take anything. But something about that didn't sit right with me. The explanation lingered uneasily in my mind. The man I had encountered appeared taken aback, almost as if he had been awaiting my arrival. As the police were about to depart, the hotel manager approached, his hands ringing together in a nervous dance. "Miss Thompson," he began, "I can't apologize enough for this incident. We've comped your stay, of course, and if there's anything else we can do." I interrupted him, my voice steady yet firm. "I want to see the security footage from the hallway outside my room and the lobby." He hesitated, uncertainty flickering across his face. "I'm not sure that's. Either you show me or I call my lawyer," I said, surprising myself with my forcefulness. 20 minutes later, I found myself staring at grainy security footage of the hallway outside my room. We watched as the man approached my door, looking around furtively before swiping a key card. The door opened smoothly for him. "How is this possible?" The manager muttered, more to himself than to me, but my attention was drawn elsewhere. Just before he entered my room, the man looked directly at the camera and smiled. A chill ran down my spine. We desired clarity, so we turned to the lobby footage, observing as a man entered through the front door with an unsettling calmness, about an hour before my return. He approached the front desk, exchanged a few words with the clerk, and was handed a key card. "That's impossible," the night clerk, who had just joined, remarked. I never gave him a key. I've never even seen him before. Yet, the footage told a different story. Somehow, this man had secured a key to my room, slipping past the watchful eyes of the hotel staff. As I lay in bed that night, sleep eluded me, despite the upgraded accommodations. With the suite and the extra security the hotel had provided, my mind kept wandering back to the events of the evening. Why my room? Why me? What had he been searching for? I tossed and turned, startled by every little sound. As the clock struck 3 a.m., my phone buzzed softly, a message from an unfamiliar number. My hand trembled as I opened it, revealing the words, "Thanks for the chat, Sophia. See you again soon." A chill crept through me. I had never shared my name. Within 10 minutes, I was out of the hotel, my suitcase hastily packed and bumping against my leg as I hurried to my car. I drove into the night, glancing around, alert to the shadows that danced in the darkness. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, I found myself glancing nervously into my rearview mirror, half convinced that a pair of headlights was trailing me. I pulled into a rest stop, seeking a moment of clarity amidst the chaos. The thought of calling the police crossed my mind again, but doubt gnawed at me. Would they even believe my story? And if they did, what could they possibly do? Just then, my phone buzzed, a chilling reminder of my predicament. Another message from that unknown number. "Running won't help, Sophia. I'll always find you." In that instant, a resolve washed over me. I powered down my phone, tossed it into the trash, and resumed my journey. I had no clear destination, but a sense of purpose guided me forward. I found myself unable to return home, for that was the very first place he would search. As I drove into the brightening day, my thoughts swirled with questions. Who was this man? What did he seek from me? And how long would I have to flee before I could feel safe once more? One truth stood clear. My life, as I had known it, had come to an end, all because I had opened a hotel room door to discover a stranger within. Now, I was the stranger, steering toward an uncertain future, haunted by the fear that every face I encountered might belong to him. The open road lay ahead, a tapestry woven with both possibility and peril. In the shadows of uncertainty, I found myself a fugitive, fleeing from a threat that eluded my understanding. A man, nameless and faceless, pursued me, yet my resolve to survive burned bright. I was determined to peel back the layers of this mystery and reclaim my life, no matter how long the journey would take. As I passed a sign welcoming me to the next state, a small, grim smile crept across my face. The game had begun, and I was ready to play. When I first laid eyes on the cabin nestled in the woods, it seemed like the perfect sanctuary. Little did I know, I was stepping into a nightmare that would test the very limits of my endurance. Survival. I had been planning this getaway for months, a much-needed escape after a year filled with relentless work and the tumultuous end of a long-term relationship. I sought solitude to decompress and rediscover myself. Then, I stumbled upon a listing for a secluded cabin, devoid of Wi-Fi and with limited cell service. It felt like fate. The drive was enchanting, with winding roads and trees adorned in autumn hues. As I arrived at the cabin, I could feel the tension in my shoulders begin to melt away. The place was rustic yet charming, featuring a wide porch and windows that sparkled in the late light. It was a warm afternoon when I was unloading my car, and that's when I first encountered Noah, the caretaker of the property. He appeared from a path in the woods, catching me off guard. "You must be Olivia," he said, his voice rough yet not unkind. "I'm Noah. I look after the place." I nodded, attempting to mask my surprise. "Nice to meet you, Noah. I didn't realize anyone would be around." He waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, don't you worry about me. I've got my own place down the way. Just wanted to make sure you got in all right." There was something in his smile that sent a shiver down my spine, but I brushed it off as nerves from being in a new place. "Well, thanks," I said, hefting my bag. "I think I can manage from here." Noah nodded, his eyes lingering on me a beat too long. "You enjoy your stay now, Olivia. If you need anything at all, you just holler." I watched him disappear back into the woods, an inexplicable chill running down my spine despite the warm day. The inside of the cabin was just as charming as the outside. I spent the rest of the afternoon settling in, unpacking my books and art supplies. As the sun began to set, I prepared a simple dinner and settled onto the porch with a glass of wine, gazing at the stars as they began to twinkle in the night sky. It was a perfect moment of tranquility, just what I needed. However, that serenity was abruptly interrupted at 2 a.m. As I stirred from my slumber, the sound of footsteps on the porch reached my ears, and for a fleeting moment, I wondered if I was still caught in a dream. But then, the unmistakable creak of a floorboard under the weight of an unseen presence broke the silence. My heart raced, leaping into my throat as I propped myself up in bed, straining to listen in the enveloping darkness. The footsteps moved slowly, deliberately, as if the visitor had no concern for being discovered. As I paused before my bedroom window, I held my breath, a chill of fear wrapping around me. A shadow danced across the moonlit floor, and for a fleeting moment, I caught sight of a familiar face, Noah's, before he slipped away into the darkness. My thoughts raced, questions swirling like leaves in the wind. What could he possibly want at this hour? I reached for my phone, my hands trembling, only to be reminded of the silence that surrounded me, the absence of service leaving me utterly alone. The footsteps faded, and I heard the creak of the porch steps as Noah descended. Yet an unsettling feeling lingered. I sensed he wasn't truly leaving. He was there, waiting, watching. I didn't know what to do next. As the first light of dawn broke, I found myself wide awake, hastily tossing my belongings into my bag. The urgency to leave enveloped me, and in my fervor, I nearly missed the sound of the front door creaking open. My heart raced, each beat echoing in the stillness as heavy footsteps echoed through the cabin. "Olivia!" a voice called out, too cheerful for such an early hour. "You up yet? Thought I'd bring you some fresh eggs for breakfast." I remained silent, my gaze darting around the room, searching for an escape route. The window beckoned, though the drop was not far. To the ground, just as I was about to make a break for it, Noah appeared in the doorway. His eyes narrowed as he took in my half-packed bag. "Going somewhere?" he asked, all pretense of friendliness gone from his voice. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. I got called back to work. Emergency." Noah stepped into the room, blocking my path to the door. "Now that's a shame," he said, his tone making it clear he didn't believe me, especially since there's no cell service up here. "How'd they reach you, I wonder?" I backed away, my legs trembling. As I pressed against the edge of the bed, I felt a chill run down my spine. "Noah, I don't want any trouble. Just let me leave," I pleaded. He shook his head, a twisted smile creeping across his face. "Oh, Olivia, don't you know you're already in trouble?" The moment that followed was a blur, fueled by adrenaline and instinct. Noah lunged toward me, and in a desperate act, I seized the bedside lamp, swinging it with all my strength. It struck his head with a sickening crack, and he staggered back, dazed. Without a second thought, I dashed past him, racing out of the bedroom and toward the front door, my heart pounding in my chest. Panic washed over me as I realized the eggs he had brought lay shattered on the floor. I slipped in the mess, crashing to the ground. Before I could regain my footing, Noah was upon me, his weight pinning me down, hands wrapped tightly around my throat. "You shouldn't have done that, Olivia," he growled, his face mere inches from mine. "We could have had such a nice time together." Black spots danced in my vision as I fought for breath. In a moment of desperation, I reached out, my fingers closing around a shard of the broken egg carton. With the last of my strength, I thrust it into Noah's eye. He howled in pain, releasing me as he clutched at his face. I scrambled to my feet, gasping for air, and ran. I burst out of the cabin and into the woods, not caring which direction I went, as long as it was away from Noah. I could hear him behind me, crashing through the underbrush, his enraged shouts echoing through the trees. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs felt like jelly. The forest was a maze, every tree looking the same as the last. I had no idea where I was or which direction to take. As I sought refuge, my breath quickened, and then I heard Noah's voice, closer than I had anticipated. "Olivia, you can't hide from me. This is my forest. I know every inch of it." Panic surged within me, igniting a new wave of energy, and I dashed forward. Yet, in my frantic escape, I failed to notice the root protruding from the earth. My foot caught it, and I tumbled down a steep incline, landing hard at the bottom. Dazed and in pain, I attempted to rise, only to be met with a sharp jolt in my ankle. Sprained, perhaps broken. I stifled a sob of frustration, the darkness around me thickening with each passing moment. As the shadows deepened, a sense of dread enveloped me. I could hear Noah's footsteps drawing nearer, each crunch of leaves echoing in the stillness. My heart raced as I searched for a place to conceal myself, and then I spotted a hollow log just a few feet away. It was a tight fit, but I managed to squeeze inside, forcing myself to stifle my ragged breaths. Noah's voice floated down to me, taunting and playful. "I know you're down there, Olivia. Why don't you come out and we can talk about this?" I pressed my hand over my mouth, willing myself to remain silent, as tears streamed down my cheeks. Tears streamed down my face as I listened to him navigate the slope. His voice grew nearer, a haunting whisper. "You're not the first to try and run, but they all come back in the end. They always do." A chill coursed through me at his words. How many others had there been? How long had he been at this? His footsteps halted right beside my hiding place, and I could glimpse his boots through a crack in the log. I held my breath, praying he wouldn't discover me. For what felt like an eternity, he lingered there, so close that I could hear his breathing deeply. He finally moved on. "I'll find you, Olivia," he called out as he walked away. "You can't hide forever." I waited until his footsteps faded into silence before crawling out of the log. My ankle throbbed, but the pain was nothing compared to the fear coursing through me. I knew I couldn't outrun him, not in this condition. I needed a plan. Looking around, I spotted a sturdy branch that could serve as a makeshift crutch. As I leaned on it, testing my weight, an idea began to form. Noah thought he knew these woods better than anyone, but that was about to become his downfall. Over the next few hours, I set traps. Tripwires made from vines, pitfalls covered with leaves. Anything I could think of to slow him down or, better yet, incapacitate him. As the sun began to set, I heard Noah's voice again, closer this time. "Getting dark, Olivia. Woods can be dangerous at night. Why don't you come on out and we'll go back to the nice warm cabin?" I gritted my teeth, steeling myself. This ended now. I let him see me just for a moment before limping away. I heard him. With a soft chuckle, I recalled the moment he believed he had me cornered. Olivia, there was nowhere to run now. I had lured him into a playful chase, always just out of reach, guiding him deeper into the shadowy embrace of the forest. I could hear his frustrated curses as he stumbled over one of my cleverly placed wires, followed by a cry of pain as he tumbled into a hidden pitfall. That was my moment. I turned and hobbled as swiftly as my legs would allow, hoping to find the road. Behind me, Noah's furious shouts faded into the distance. Just when I thought my strength might abandon me, I caught sight of it. The glimmer of moonlight reflecting off metal, a car waiting in the night. As I broke through the tree line, I waved my arms frantically at the approaching headlights. The car screeched to a halt, and a startled couple peered out at me. "Please," I gasped. "Help me, call the police." As we sped away from the forest, my ordeal finally over, I couldn't help but reflect on Noah's words. How many others had there been? How many hadn't escaped? In that moment, I made a silent vow. Once I was safe, once Noah was behind bars, I would find out. I would ensure that every one of his victims received justice. The cabin. In the woods, I had hoped to find my escape, but instead, it transformed into a battleground where I unearthed the depths of my own strength. As the first police sirens echoed in the distance, a chilling realization washed over me. My fight was far from over. I had never imagined that a simple act of kindness could spiral into the most harrowing night of my life. Now, as I sit here with trembling hands, I come to understand that sometimes the true monsters we dread are not lurking beneath our beds, but are seated right beside us in the passenger seat. It was close to midnight, and as I drove home after a long shift at the hospital, the rain poured down in sheets, obscuring my view to just a few feet ahead. Fatigue weighed heavily on me, my eyes stinging from the effort of keeping them focused on the road. Then, in a fleeting moment as my headlights swept across the roadside, I caught sight of him. There he stood, drenched and with his thumb out, a man likely in his mid-30s. His face bore a friendly expression, yet his eyes held a desperate plea. Deep down, I knew I shouldn't stop. Every instinct and warning I had ever received echoed in my mind. The night was heavy with rain, each drop a reminder of the dangers lurking in the shadows. A voice inside me urged to keep driving, to ignore the figure on the roadside. Yet, perhaps it was the fatigue weighing on my mind or a flicker of misplaced compassion that compelled me to slow down. I pulled over, the window sliding down just a crack, and called out into the storm, "You okay?" He jogged over, relief washing over his face, his voice barely cutting through the downpour. "Thank God," he said. "My car broke down a few miles back. I've been walking for hours." A moment of hesitation gripped me, but then I made a choice, one that would haunt me later. "Hop in," I said, unlocking the door. "And where are you headed?" he asked as he slid into the seat, water dripping from his clothes onto the upholstery. "Just to the next town," he replied, flashing me a grateful smile. "I'm William, by the way." "Olivia," I said, pulling back onto the road. "You're lucky I came along. Not many people are out at this hour." William nodded, running a hand through his wet hair. "Yeah, I was starting to lose hope. You're a real lifesaver." We drove in silence for a few minutes, the only sounds being the rhythmic swish of the wipers and the drumming of rain on the roof. As I sat there, I couldn't help but steal glances at William from the corner of my eye. He appeared harmless enough, gazing out the window with a look of relief. To ease the tension in the air, I ventured, "What do you do for a living, William?" He turned to me, and for just a fleeting moment, something flickered in his eyes, sending a chill down my spine. But it vanished so swiftly that I questioned if I had truly seen it. "Oh, this and that," he replied vaguely. "I'm between jobs at the moment. What about you? That looks like a nurse's uniform." I nodded, suddenly acutely aware of the atmosphere around us. Much information I was sharing with a complete stranger. "Yeah, I work at St. Grace's. Just finished a 12-hour shift." William's eyebrows raised. 12 hours? You must be exhausted. Maybe I should drive." A wave of unease washed over me. "No, that's okay. I'm used to it." He shrugged, but I noticed his eyes lingering on the steering wheel. "If you're sure. So, you live around here?" I hesitated, then lied. "No, just passing through, visiting a friend." William nodded, but something in his expression told me he didn't believe me. The uneasy feeling lingered in the air. The feeling in my stomach deepened as we turned off the main road onto a narrower, dimly lit street. Trees loomed on either side, their branches stretching out like gnarled fingers in the darkness. "This doesn't look like the way to town," I said, struggling to keep the tremor from my voice. In an instant, William's demeanor shifted. The friendly facade fell away, replaced by something cold and calculating. "No," he replied, his voice low and menacing. "It's not." My heart began to race, and I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles turning white. "I think you should get out," he added, a chill creeping into the air. "Now," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He laughed, a sound devoid of any warmth. "I don't think so, Olivia. We're going to keep driving, and you're going to take me exactly where I want to go." I saw him reach into his jacket, and my breath caught in my throat. Was he armed? I couldn't risk finding out. In a moment of desperation, I slammed on the brakes. The car skidded on the wet road, fishtailing wildly. William was thrown forward, his head smacking against the dashboard. I didn't wait to see if he was okay. I threw the car into park and scrambled for the door handle, but William recovered quicker than I anticipated. His hand shot out, grabbing my arm in a vice-like grip. "That wasn't very smart, Olivia," he growled, pulling me back. I fought against his hold, my free hand searching frantically for anything I could use as a weapon. My fingers closed around my travel mug in the cup holder. Without thinking, I swung it at William's head. The mug connected with a sickening thud, hot coffee splashing everywhere, and William's grip loosened. I seized the opportunity to, with a sudden rush, I wrenched the door open and tumbled out into the rain. The ground was slick beneath my feet, and as I tried to run, I slipped, the sound of William's curses echoing behind me, the car door slamming shut as he gave chase. I plunged blindly into the woods that bordered the road, branches whipping against my face, my shoes sinking into the muddy earth. My lungs burned, and my legs felt heavy as lead, yet the terror coursing through me propelled me forward. I could hear William crashing through the underbrush behind me, drawing closer with each fleeting second. He was bigger, stronger, and unlike me, he wasn't exhausted from a long day. Just when I thought my legs might give out, a glimmer of light caught my eye through the trees. A house. Hope surged within me, granting a final burst of energy. I burst out of the tree line and into a small clearing where an old farmhouse stood, a single light glowing in an upstairs window. I sprinted toward it, my feet slipping on the wet grass. Reaching the porch, I began pounding on the door. "Help!" I screamed, my voice hoarse. "Please, somebody help me." I heard movement inside, and then the porch light flickered on. The door opened to reveal an elderly man stood with wide eyes, concern etched across his face. "Please," I gasped, "let me in. There's a man, he's trying to." My words were cut short as a hand gripped my shoulder, spinning me around. William loomed before me, his expression twisted with rage, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead where I had struck him with the mug. Now, Olivia," he said, his voice unervingly calm. "Don't go telling tales. We wouldn't want our new friend here to get the wrong idea." The elderly man glanced between us, confusion and fear mingling in his gaze. "What's going on here?" He demanded that William open his mouth to speak, but I cut him off. "He's not who he says he is," I blurted out. "He made me drive him here. He's dangerous. Please, call the police." For a moment, nobody moved. Then, quicker than I thought possible, the old man reached behind the door and pulled out a shotgun. "You," he said, pointing the gun at William. "Get off my property now." William's eyes darted between the gun and me, and I could see the calculations running behind his eyes. Finally, he stepped back, hands raised. "This isn't over," he said, his eyes lingering with a mix of defiance and fear. As the shadows deepened, he locked eyes with mine before turning and vanishing into the night. The old man gently ushered me inside, securing the door with a firm click behind us. As the rush of adrenaline faded, a tremor took hold of my body. His wife soon appeared, wrapping a warm blanket around my shoulders and placing a steaming cup of tea in my trembling hands. Meanwhile, her husband was on the phone, calling the police. Hours later, after I had given my statement and watched the officers search the woods for any trace of William, I found myself sitting in the farmhouse kitchen, still grappling with the surreal events that had unfolded. "You're lucky," one of the officers remarked, his voice steady amidst the lingering tension. As he concluded taking my statement, I learned that they had been searching for this man for months, suspected in at least 3 abductions in the area. I nodded numbly, the full weight of my escape settling upon me. If I hadn't stopped when I did, if I hadn't fought back, as dawn broke, casting a pale light over the rain-soaked landscape, I made a silent vow. I would never pick up a hitchhiker again, no matter how harmless they appeared, no matter how dire the weather. The kindness of strangers can be a beautiful thing, but sometimes it leads to shadows lurking just beyond the light. Kindness can sometimes lead us down unexpected paths. That night, I discovered a hard truth. The monsters we dread aren't always the ones that roar or howl. They can approach us with a gentle smile and a tale of misfortune. Yet, amidst this revelation, I found a deeper strength within myself, a resilience I had never recognized before. As I prepared to leave the farmhouse, the patrol car waiting to take me home, I cast one final glance at the woods where I had once fled in terror. Somewhere in those shadows, William still lingered, but he had not defeated me. Instead, he had forged a stronger version of myself, ready to face whatever lay ahead. More cautious, more aware, and if our paths ever crossed again, I would be ready, for now I understood the truth. Sometimes the most dangerous predators are those lurking in plain sight, biding their time for a moment of kindness to strike. The instant I heard that first unexplained noise, I should have packed my bags and left, but curiosity got the better of me. Now, I find myself ensnared in a nightmare of my own making, with no certainty of escape. It all began on a Tuesday when I checked into the Oakwood Hotel for a week-long conference. Nothing seemed amiss. It was a place that felt familiar yet slightly out of the ordinary. The atmosphere was pleasant enough, a touch dated perhaps, but clean and quiet. Ideal for those evenings when work beckoned. The first 2 nights slipped by without a hitch, but on the third night, as I began to surrender to sleep, I heard it. A gentle thud, followed by whispers that seemed to drift from the room next door. Normally, I might have brushed it off, but there was one detail that lingered in my mind. That room was empty. I had seen the vacant sign hanging on the door just earlier that day. Sitting up in bed, I strained to listen, the whispers continuing, too muffled to decipher. Words lingered in the air, a presence felt but not seen. Then, just as abruptly as they had begun, they ceased. I reassured myself that it was merely my imagination, a trick of the mind brought on by the stress of the conference and perhaps too much coffee. Yet, as I settled back down, an unsettling feeling clung to me, whispering that something was amiss. The following morning, I approached the front desk clerk with a casual demeanor, inquiring if anyone had checked into the room beside mine. "No, sir," she replied, her eyes scanning the computer screen. "That room's been empty all week. Is there a problem?" I forced a smile, dismissing the unease. No problem. Just..." As I turned to leave, a fleeting glance at the clerk's face caught my attention. For just a moment, I could have sworn I detected a flicker of something. Fear, perhaps, or guilt. Yet, when I looked back, her expression had returned to one of neutrality, professionalism. That night, a resolve settled within me. I was determined to uncover the truth. I stayed up late, feigning productivity on my laptop, but my ears were finely tuned to the sounds emanating from next door. Around midnight, it came again, the thud, followed by the whispers. This time, I was prepared. I crept to the door, opened it as quietly as I could, and peered into the dimly lit hallway. What I witnessed sent a chill down my spine. A man in a hotel uniform was unlocking the door to a room that was supposed to be vacant. Yet, it wasn't the act itself that filled me with fear. It was the expression on his face, a blend of dread and resignation, as if he were walking toward his own execution. Our eyes met for a fleeting moment, and we simply stared at one another. Then, he hurriedly stepped inside, closing the door behind him. I remained there, frozen in place, my heart racing, pondering the unsettling scene I had just observed. Part of me longed to retreat to the safety of my bed, to escape the weight of what I had seen. Imagine, if you will, a scene shrouded in the stillness of night. I feigned ignorance, though a larger part of me understood the weight of what I had witnessed. I waited patiently, biding my time until I was certain the coast was clear. With cautious steps, I descended to the lobby, where silence reigned, broken only by the presence of the night clerk. This man was different, older, with deep-set eyes that seemed to hold untold stories and a frown that suggested he had seen much in his time. "Excuse me," I ventured, approaching the desk. "I believe I left something in the conference room. May I have the key?" He regarded me for a long moment, his expression a mask of inscrutability. Then, without a word, he reached beneath the desk and handed me the key, the air thick with unspoken tension. "Thank you for the key card," I said, striving to maintain a steady tone. "I'll return it shortly." He nodded, his gaze fixed on me as I turned to leave. The conference room awaited on the second floor, and with each step up the stairs, an unsettling sensation crept over me, as if unseen eyes were tracking my every move. The key card felt weighty in my grip, almost as if it were searing my palm. Upon reaching the conference room door, I swiped the card, and the lock clicked open. Taking a deep breath, I entered. The room was shrouded in darkness, illuminated only by the faint glow of an exit sign. As my eyes began to adjust to the dimness, I found myself in a dimly lit room, the air thick with an unsettling quiet. A group of individuals, clad in uniforms that marked them as hotel staff, were gathered around a table, their voices barely above a whisper. As I stepped inside, their conversation ceased, and a wave of eyes turned toward me, the atmosphere heavy with unspoken tension. "I'm sorry," I stammered, a chill creeping up my spine as I sensed the weight of the moment. "I think I'm in the wrong room." Just as I turned to escape, a firm hand seized my arm. I looked up to meet the gaze of the night clerk, his grip unyielding. "You're exactly where you're supposed to be," he murmured, his voice low and foreboding, sending a shiver through the stillness of the night. "We've been expecting you." The next few hours unfolded in a haze of confusion and dread. The hotel staff, it seemed, were entwined in something far more sinister than I could have ever envisioned. They whispered of ancient pacts and sacrifices required to keep the hotel thriving, of guests who checked in but never checked out. I listened, entranced yet horrified, as they recounted how the hotel selected its victims. Always solitary travelers, always those who wouldn't be missed immediately. They spoke of the empty rooms, repurposed for their dark rituals, and the chilling fate that awaited the bodies. "But why are you telling me all this?" I asked, my voice trembling. The night clerk, who I now realized was the leader of this twisted cult, smiled, a cold, joyless expression. "Because, Mr. Thompson, you've been chosen. You're going to help us with our next ritual." I tried to run, but they were prepared for that. Strong hands seized me, holding me in place as the clerk approached with a syringe. "Don't worry," he said, pushing the needle into my arm. "Soon you'll understand. Soon you'll be one of us." I awoke back in my room, my head pounding. In a moment of confusion, my memories blurred, and for a fleeting instant, I believed it had all been a dreadful dream. But then, my gaze fell upon the bruise on my arm, a stark reminder of the needle's intrusion, and the chilling reality of my predicament enveloped me. I leapt from my bed, rushing to the door, only to discover it was locked. My phone and laptop had vanished, leaving me ensnared in this unsettling place. The days that followed morphed into a haunting cycle of solitude and dread. Food would mysteriously appear in my room at regular intervals, yet the identity of the deliverer remained a mystery. The television flickered only with static, and my phone lay lifeless. I tried everything I could think of. In the dim light of the room, thoughts raced through my mind, each one a desperate attempt to escape. I tried picking the lock, signaling for help through the window, even considering breaking down the door. Yet nothing seemed to work. Time blurred, and on what felt like the fifth day, the door creaked open. The night clerk stood there, flanked by two imposing men in suits. "It's time, Mr. Thompson," he said, his voice steady. "Are you ready to join us?" I knew this was my only chance. As they guided me down the shadowy hallway, I feigned a stumble. When one of the men moved to assist me, I struck, hitting him with all the strength I could muster. With a surge of adrenaline, I dashed down the stairs, my feet pounding against the floor as I raced through the dimly lit corridors. The echo of footsteps chased me, a haunting reminder of the danger lurking close behind. Bursting into the lobby, I startled a group of new guests who were checking in, my voice trembling as I cried out for help. "Call the police! They're trying to kill me!" Their faces reflected shock and confusion, mirroring my own panic. The front desk clerk, the same young woman I had encountered on my first day, picked up the phone. For a fleeting moment, hope flickered within me, But then I saw her expression shift. She wasn't calling for help. She was summoning backup. In that instant, I knew I had to flee, and without a second thought, I bolted out into the night. Footsteps echoed as I fled the hotel and ventured into the night, not pausing until my legs could carry me no further. Now, I find myself in a quaint diner, penning these words on a borrowed phone. Doubt lingers in my mind. Will anyone truly believe me? Even I struggle to accept the reality of what transpired. The Oakwood Hotel, with its charming facade, conceals a sinister truth, a veil for something dark and dreadful. I fear I am not the first to uncover this secret, merely the first to escape its grasp. If you are reading this and contemplating a visit to the Oakwood, heed my warning. The advice is straightforward. Steer clear of that hotel. If you find yourself there, resist the urge to inquire about the unsettling sounds that echo through the night. Do not delve into the peculiar happenings that unfold around you. And above all, place no trust in the staff, for once you uncover the truth, escape may no longer be an option. I consider myself fortunate, but I cannot say the same for the next guest. As for my own path forward, I ponder whether to approach the authorities, though I fear they would dismiss my tale. Exposing the hotel would mean putting my life on the line. For now, all I can do is flee and cling to hope. There exists a whisper, a promise that one day the secrets of the Oakwood Hotel will emerge from the shadows. Yet, I know this much, my perception of hotels has forever changed. For now, I understand that the true terrors may not lurk beneath the bed, but rather, they are the very souls who greet you with a warm smile as they hand over the room key. The first time I sensed something amiss, I dismissed it as mere forgetfulness. By the moment I grasped the reality, it was nearly too late. Who could have foreseen that house sitting could spiral into such a haunting ordeal? It all began. In a seemingly innocent manner, my college friend Olivia approached me with a request. Would I mind watching over her house for a month while she embarked on an extended business trip? The timing felt serendipitous, as I had just wrapped up a freelance project and found myself in between jobs. The thought of residing in a spacious suburban home, rather than my cramped studio apartment, was simply too enticing to resist. The first week unfolded without incident. I fell into a comforting routine, working on my laptop by day and indulging in Netflix marathons by night. Olivia's house, while cozy, felt almost too expansive for just one soul to inhabit. There were moments when I would glance over my shoulder, a peculiar sensation creeping in, as if unseen eyes were upon me. I attributed it to the strangeness of my surroundings. It was on the 8th day that I first encountered something unusual. I awoke and made my way to the kitchen for a cup of coffee, only to find the mug I had left in the sink the night before, now clean and resting on the counter. A frown crossed my face as I tried to recall if I had washed it before drifting off to sleep. Surely I must have. I brushed it off, thinking perhaps I was simply more fatigued than I realized. Yet, the oddities continued to unfold, small occurrences that were all too easy to overlook. Individually, each occurrence felt unsettling, yet when viewed as a whole, they painted a more disturbing picture. A book I was certain I had left on the coffee table would mysteriously find its way back to the shelf. The TV remote would often be on the opposite side of the room from where I had placed it. One morning, I descended the stairs to discover all the kitchen chairs pulled out from the table. Doubts began to creep in. Was I losing my mind? Was I sleepwalking or experiencing memory lapses? To find some clarity, I started taking photos of the rooms before I went to bed, comparing them to how they appeared in the morning. More often than not, subtle changes would greet me, leaving me with an unsettling sense of unease. By the third week, I found myself a bundle of nerves, sleeping with the bedroom door locked, startled by every creak and groan of the house settling around me. I thought about reaching out to Olivia, but what could I possibly say? I think your house is moving things around at night? She would surely think I had lost my mind. It was on a Tuesday night when everything reached a tipping point. After tossing and turning for what felt like an eternity, I finally drifted into a restless sleep, only to be jolted awake by a soft thud, as if something had been set down with great care. I lay perfectly still, straining my ears. There it was again, a shuffling sound coming from downstairs. My heart began to race. This wasn't my imagination. There was someone in the house. I reached for my phone with trembling hands, ready to call for help, but as my fingers touched the screen, a chilling thought struck me. What if they'd cut the phone lines? In movies, that's always what the intruders did first. Slowly, careful not to make a sound, I got out of bed. I needed to see what I was dealing with. I crept toward the bedroom door, pressed my ear against the door, and the shuffling had ceased, replaced by something else. Breathing. Slow, steady breathing just beyond the threshold. I stumbled back, clapping a hand over my mouth to stifle a scream. The doorknob began to turn, slowly, deliberately. In a panic, I searched for a weapon, anything to defend myself. My gaze landed on a heavy glass vase on the dresser. I grasped it tightly, feeling its weight as I backed away from the door, which opened with an agonizing slowness. As I lifted my gaze, prepared to confront an intruder, what I beheld in the doorway halted me in my tracks. It was not a burglar nor a serial killer, but a man, though not like any man I had ever encountered. He stood tall, impossibly thin, with limbs that appeared elongated beyond reason. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and his eyes, oh, those eyes were black voids, devoid of pupils and filled with an unsettling emptiness. For a fleeting moment, we locked eyes, each of us frozen in a silent exchange. Then he spoke. His voice was a dry whisper, echoing from everywhere and nowhere all at once. "You weren't supposed to." As I stood there, the vase slipped from my numb fingers, shattering on the floor. The sound seemed to break whatever spell had enveloped us. The creature, whatever it was, lunged forward with a speed that felt almost human. I don't recall making the decision to move. One moment I was frozen in terror, and the next, I was shoving past him, running down the hallway toward the stairs. I could hear him behind me, his breathing raspy and excited. I took the stairs 2 at a time, nearly losing my footing in my haste. My only thought was to escape, to reach my car and drive as far away as possible. As I descended the final step, a chill gripped my heart. The front door had vanished, replaced by an unyielding wall. I whirled around, desperately searching for an escape, but the house had transformed into a labyrinth of confusion. Doors that once promised freedom now led to unfamiliar rooms, and the windows revealed only an abyss of darkness, as if the very structure were adrift in a boundless void. "You can't leave," a voice whispered from the shadows behind me. "None of us can." I turned slowly, pressing my back against the cold wall, my mind racing with disbelief. What was happening? "Are you curious about this place?" He tilted his head, his empty black eyes fixed on me. "This house, it breathes. It feeds on our fear, our despair. It has been ages since it welcomed someone new to play with." "No," I shook my head, denying the truth of it. "This isn't real. It can't be." He stepped closer, and for the first time, I noticed that his feet barely grazed the ground. "I've been here for what feels like an eternity, decades, perhaps centuries. Time dances differently in this house, you see." As I sat there, the shadows danced around me, whispering secrets of the night. It was as if the very air was thick with tension, each word spoken a thread weaving a tapestry of dread. My mind struggled to grasp the reality of his chilling revelation. Olivia, the name that once felt warm and inviting, now echoed with a sinister undertone. The creature, once a man, released a sound that sent shivers down my spine. A laugh, perhaps, but devoid of any joy. "Olivia isn't real," he said, his voice a haunting melody. "Just a lure, a mere fiction spun by the house to ensnare the unsuspecting." My heart raced as I realized the truth. I was not the first to fall into this trap, nor would I be the last. The weight of despair pressed down on me, and I felt my legs weaken, surrendering to the cold, unforgiving floor. This couldn't be real. It had to be a nightmare from which I could awaken. In the stillness of the night, I held on to the hope that I would awaken in my own apartment, chuckling at the absurdity of it all. But instead, There it was, the creature, kneeling before me, its face mere inches from mine. "I'm sorry," it murmured, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I glimpsed a trace of humanity in those endless eyes. "I tried to warn you, to scare you away, but the house, it's too strong. It always wins." As if echoing its words, the house let out a low groan, the walls rippling around us, and I felt the unsettling sensation of the floor tilting beneath me. What was happening? As I gasped and scrambled to my feet, the creature rose too, surveying its surroundings with an air of resignation. It was changing once more, reshaping itself as it always did, each transformation a new puzzle to unravel. I stood frozen, watching in horror as the walls began to shift, doors vanishing and reappearing in unfamiliar places. The staircase twisted and turned, spiraling upward into an abyss of darkness. Around us, whispers began to fill the air, countless voices, some pleading, others screaming, and a few laughing with a chilling madness. "The others," the creature murmured, its gaze lingering on my startled reaction to the unsettling sounds. "All trapped like us. Sometimes we see each other, sometimes we don't. The house decides." I shook my head, grappling with the incomprehensible nature of our predicament. There has to be a way out. We can't just give up. For the first time, I noticed a flicker of pity in the creature's expression. "Oh, we don't give up. We keep trying, keep searching. But the house, it revels in our hope, in our desperate attempts to escape. It's all part of the game, as the house transforms." As I slowed my pace, I found myself in a long corridor, each door unique. Some old and weathered, others sleek and modern. At the far end, a creature lingered, already beginning to fade into the shadows. "Wait!" I called out, desperation creeping into my voice. "What do I do now?" His voice returned, growing fainter with each word. "Survive, explore, and whatever you do, don't trust what you see. Nothing here is what it seems." And just like that, it was gone, leaving me alone in the impossible corridor. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, grappling with the weight of its warning. In the stillness of the moment, a part of me held onto the fragile hope that this was merely an elaborate trick of the mind, a fleeting illusion. Yet, beneath that surface, a deeper truth settled in. I was ensnared, caught in the clutches of something unfathomable. With a steadying breath, I surveyed the doors before me, each one a potential path to either salvation or despair, shrouded in uncertainty. With no other options available, I stepped forward, my hand reaching for the nearest handle. As I turned it, a silent promise formed in my heart. I would not succumb to the fate of the creature that haunted my thoughts. Though I wouldn't allow this house to conquer me, I was determined to find my escape. The door creaked open, unveiling a room that seemed to bend the very fabric of reality. As I crossed the threshold, I understood that my ordeal was only beginning. The moment those hushed words reached my ears, I realized that what had started as an ordinary night shift had transformed into a perilous game of survival. Little did I know, serving coffee at 2 a.m. would lead me down such a chilling path. Would be the least of my worries. My name's Harper, and I've been working the graveyard shift at Rosie's 24-hour diner for about 6 months now. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills and gives me time to work on my novel during the slow hours. Most nights, it's just me, the cook, and a handful of regulars. Truckers passing through, college students pulling all-nighters, and the occasional insomniac looking for a slice of pie and a sympathetic ear. This particular night started like any other. I was wiping down the counter, preparing for the hours ahead. For what felt like the 100th time, I found myself half listening to the oldie station, its melodies softly weaving through the air. The gentle chime of the bell above the door broke the calm, and I looked up, plastering on my best customer service smile. Yet it faltered slightly as I took in the newcomers. For men, all dressed in dark attire that seemed a touch too refined for our humble greasy spoon, slid into a booth in the far corner. They spoke in hushed tones, their eyes darting around with an unmistakable nervousness. I grabbed some menus and made my way over, a whisper of instinct tugging at me. suggesting that something was amiss in the atmosphere that evening. As I drew closer, I overheard a fragment of their discussion. "The shipment arrives at dawn. We must be prepared." Their voices faded into silence the moment they noticed my presence, fixing me with piercing gazes that sent a shiver down my spine. "Welcome to Mel's," I greeted, feeling a sense of pride in the steadiness of my voice. "Can I start you gentlemen off with some coffee?" The man nearest to me, a burly figure with a scar tracing down his left cheek, nodded curtly. "Coffee, black, for all of us." I noted it down, even though it was unnecessary, just to occupy my hands. "I'll be right back with that." As I strolled back to the counter, I sensed their gaze lingering on me, a weighty silence enveloping the room. My thoughts raced, pondering the nature of the shipment they whispered about, their nervousness palpable. With trembling hands, I poured their coffees, striving to maintain an air of normalcy. When I approached with the mugs, I noticed the menus had been pushed aside, untouched. "Anything to eat?" I inquired, more out of habit than hope. The man with the scar simply shook his head, requesting only the coffee and a semblance of privacy. I nodded, retreating, my heart thundering in my chest as I returned to my post behind the counter. As I stood by the counter, I reached for my phone, contemplating a call to the police. Yet what could I say? I had no solid proof of wrongdoing, just an unsettling feeling and a snippet of an overheard conversation. So, I chose to linger, hoping to glean more information. I occupied myself with trivial tasks, all the while keeping my ears attuned to their booth. Their voices were too soft to decipher, but the urgency in their tone was palpable. Time slipped by, and the men continued to nurse their coffees, their heads bent close in hushed discussion. Occasionally, one would cast a glance in my direction, heightening the tension in the air. I would swiftly turn my gaze, feigning interest in restocking napkin dispensers or arranging menus. Then, in a heartbeat, the atmosphere shifted. The bell above the door chimed once more, and 2 police officers entered. It was a familiar scene. Officers often dropped by for coffee during their night shifts. Yet, the response from the men in the booth was unsettling and immediate. They tensed, hands vanishing beneath the table. A flash of metal caught my eye, and a jolt of terror coursed through me as I realized they were armed. The moments that followed felt suspended in time. As the scene unfolded in slow motion, the officers, blissfully unaware of the brewing tension, strolled casually to the counter. The men in the booth, however, were coiled like springs, poised to spring into action. I found myself frozen between them, a sudden realization washing over me. I was the only barrier standing between calm and chaos in my diner. The urgency of the moment pressed upon me, and I knew I had to act swiftly. Taking a deep breath, I stepped toward the officers, positioning myself so that my back shielded the booth. I raised my voice, louder than necessary, hoping to draw the attention of the men behind me. "Officers, great to see you. Your usual?" I asked, striving to maintain a semblance of normalcy. With a quiet intensity, I conveyed through my gaze that something was amiss. The seasoned officer, Liam, who had frequented this place for years, sensed my unease right away. His hand moved with a casual grace to rest on his holster. "Actually, Harper," he began, "we received a call about some suspicious activity in the area. Have you noticed anything unusual tonight?" I shook my head, acutely aware of the men lurking behind me. "No, sir. It's been a quiet night. Just a few regulars and some folks passing through." I emphasized the last part, hoping he would grasp the underlying tension. Liam nodded slowly, his eyes scanning the surroundings with a watchful diligence. In the diner, a sense of unease hung in the air as the officers prepared to conduct their routine check. I felt a wave of relief wash over me when I heard the words, "Coffee's on the house tonight." As the men approached the booth, the scrape of chairs echoed ominously, and I could sense the tension radiating from them. "Gentlemen," Liam said, his voice steady and commanding, "mind if we have a word?" What followed was a blur of frantic movement and chaos. 2 men dashed for the exit while another reached into his jacket. The sudden shout of "gun" pierced the atmosphere, sending a chill down my spine. Then, the air was pierced by the deafening sound of gunshots. I dove behind the counter, hands pressed over my ears, my heart racing as if it might leap from my chest. Shouting erupted, glass shattered, and then, just as suddenly, there was silence. Gathering my courage, I peeked over the counter to witness a scene of chaos. Tables overturned, coffee mugs scattered across the floor. Two officers had one man in handcuffs, while another lay motionless near the door. Liam approached me, his face grim. "You okay, Harper?" I nodded, though doubt lingered in my mind. "You did good," he said, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Your call saved lives tonight." I looked at him, confusion washing over me. "My call," he offered a slight smile. "The one you made an hour ago, reporting suspicious customers. That's why we were here." I hadn't made any call, but in that moment I understood. Liam had given me an escape, a way to explain my actions without inviting danger. The next few hours unfolded like a storm, filled with police statements, crime scene investigators, and a procession of official-looking people in suits. I learned. Fragments of the night lingered in the air, whispering tales of men entwined in a web of drug trafficking. They had awaited a shipment, a vast quantity of heroin, and by mere chance, I found myself at the heart of a significant operation, inadvertently aiding in its unraveling. As dawn broke, casting an ethereal glow over the scene marked by crime tape and police cars, I settled on the curb outside the diner, a shock blanket wrapped around my shoulders. Liam joined me, his presence a comforting anchor. "Quite the night, huh?" he remarked, offering me a cup of coffee, not from the diner, thankfully. I nodded, savoring a sip, the warmth grounding me amidst the chaos. It's hard to wrap my mind around it, really. I never imagined this would be part of the job, but I suppose that's the nature of it, isn't it? Liam mentioned that you can never predict what a shift might hold. You handled yourself remarkably well in there, Harper. Have you ever thought about pursuing a career in law enforcement? I chuckled, the sound a bit more frantic than I intended. "I think I'll stick to serving meals and working on my novel, thanks." Liam smiled, a warm gesture. "Well, if you ever reconsider, just let me know." He stood, brushing off his pants. "Get some rest. We'll need you at the station later for a formal meeting." As he walked away, I found myself gazing at the diner, a place I once knew so well, now shrouded in an unsettling aura. It felt foreign and menacing, and I understood that my perception had irrevocably changed. Each customer now seemed like a potential danger, every whispered conversation a hint of impending chaos. Yet, as the adrenaline ebbed and weariness took hold, a different realization dawned upon me. I had endured the most harrowing night imaginable and emerged intact. In that moment, I recognized that I had perhaps saved lives, and if I were to be truthful, I had just experienced an adventure unlike any other. In a moment that felt like a turning point in my life, I rose, allowing the shock to dissipate like a fading mist. Perhaps I wouldn't resign from my job after all. Perhaps, just perhaps, I had unearthed the spark I needed to finally complete my novel. They often say to write what you know, and now I found myself steeped in experiences far beyond my expectations. As I made my way to the car, the dawn broke, painting the sky in gentle hues of pink and gold, and a smile crept onto my face. Life at the diner would forever be altered, but then again, so would I. It all began when we sought refuge in that forsaken house, escaping the tempest outside. We had a sense that we had stumbled into something far more sinister than we had anticipated. By the time the weight of our predicament settled upon us, the chance to retreat had slipped away. What was meant to be a delightful family road trip, my wife Olivia, our two children, Ava, age 10, and Ethan, just 8, had taken a dark turn. We had been on the road for hours, desperately trying to escape a storm that seemed to materialize from thin air. The rain poured down in torrents, obscuring our view of the winding path ahead. "Liam, we need to stop," Olivia urged, her knuckles pale as she clutched the dashboard. "It's not safe to keep driving." As I nodded, squinting through the windshield, I agreed. You're right. I'll pull over at the next town we see. But as the minutes slipped away, it became evident that we were lost in the vastness of nowhere. No towns, no gas stations, not even a barn to shelter us from the storm. Just endless stretches of dark, rain-soaked countryside. Then, through the gloom, we spotted it. A large colonial-style house, standing solitary on a small hill, its silhouette stark against the stormy sky illuminated by a flash of lightning. Look, Ava pointed, her excitement palpable. Dad, can we stop here? I hesitated, glancing at the house that seemed to whisper secrets of abandonment. A chill ran down my spine, the kind that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. But then, a crack of thunder echoed through the air, accompanied by a worried whimper from Ethan in the back seat, and I knew what I had to do. Okay, I finally said, steering onto the long, overgrown driveway. But we'll just stay until the storm passes. As we approached the house, I realized it was in even worse shape than I had first thought. The paint was peeling from the wooden siding, and several windows were boarded up, casting an eerie shadow over the scene. The porch sagged ominously, as if it might collapse under its own weight at any moment. Are you sure about this? Olivia asked, eyeing the house wearily as we got out of the car. I forced a smile, trying to project more confidence than I felt. It'll be fine. We'll just wait inside until the worst of the storm blows over. We dashed through the rain to the porch, the old boards creaking under our feet. The front door was slightly ajar, swinging open with a spine-chilling creak when I pushed it. Hello, I called out, peering into the darkness beyond. Is anyone here? Silence enveloped me as I pulled out my phone, its flashlight cutting through the darkness to reveal the entryway. Dust motes danced in the beam, and cobwebs clung to the corners like forgotten memories. The place appeared untouched for years. Well, I said, attempting to inject some cheerfulness for the sake of the children. It looks like we've got the place to ourselves. Let's see if we can find some candles or a fireplace to warm up. We ventured deeper into the house, our wet shoes leaving tracks on the grimy hardwood floor. The interior was a maze of old furniture draped in sheets, peeling away like the layers of time itself. The wallpaper clung to the walls, heavy with musty smells, yet it was dry, and for now that was all that mattered. In what must have been the living room, we discovered an old stone fireplace. After some rummaging, I managed to find a few relatively dry logs and coaxed a small fire to life. The kids huddled close to the warmth, their earlier excitement giving way to a quiet unease. I don't like this place, you daddy? Ethan said, his lower lip trembling slightly. It feels scary. I ruffled his hair, trying to reassure him. It's just an old house, buddy. Nothing to be afraid of. But even as I spoke, a shiver danced through the air, whispering secrets of the night around us. As I spoke, an unsettling sensation crept over me, a feeling that unseen eyes were upon us. I found myself glancing back, half anticipating the sight of someone, or perhaps something, hiding in the shadows. Olivia, attuned to my discomfort, gently squeezed my hand and murmured, "Maybe we should find a bedroom and get the kids settled for the night." I nodded, thankful for her thoughtfulness. We gathered the children and made our way upstairs, the ancient staircase creaking beneath our footsteps. The second floor revealed itself to be just as worn and weary as the first, with long hallways stretching out, lined with secrets waiting to be uncovered. We approached the closed doors, settling on the first bedroom we encountered. It was a spacious room, dominated by a grand four-poster bed, still standing strong. The mattress, though musty, was dry enough for our needs, so we decided it would suffice for the night. While Olivia tended to the children, preparing them for sleep, I felt a pull to explore the rest of the upstairs, seeking a sense of reassurance. Most of the rooms bore the marks of time, filled with broken furniture and layers of dust that whispered of forgotten stories. Yet, as I reached the last door at the end of the hall, something compelled me to stop. This door, unlike the others, was immaculate, its wood gleaming as if it had been untouched by the years that had weathered everything else around it. Gleaming as if it had just been polished, The brass doorknob shone in the beam of my flashlight. Against my better judgment, I reached out and turned the knob. The door swung open silently, revealing a room that took my breath away. Unlike the rest of the house, this room looked like it was frozen in time. Everything was immaculate, from the neatly made bed to the books arranged perfectly on the shelves. There wasn't a speck of dust anywhere. But what really caught my attention was the doll. It sat in a small chair by the window. In the dim light, a porcelain face emerged, momentarily illuminated by a flash of lightning. Its glass eyes appeared to follow my every movement, while its painted smile sent an unsettling chill down my spine. I found myself retreating from the room, hastily shutting the door behind me, my heart racing as I took a few deep breaths to steady my nerves. It was merely a room, I reassured myself, just an old doll, nothing to fear. When I returned to our room, Olivia was gently tucking the children into bed. "Everything okay?" she asked, her gaze catching my pale face. I nodded, not wishing to burden her with my unease. "Yeah, just tired. It's been a long day." We settled in for the night, the sound of rain on the roof and the occasional rumble of thunder lulling us into an uneasy sleep. I woke with a start, unsure of what had disturbed me. The room was pitch black, the fire having long since died out. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I realized what had woken me, the sound of footsteps coming from the hallway outside our room. I sat up, my heart pounding. "Olivia," I whispered, shaking her gently. "Wake up." "Do you hear that?" She stirred, blinking in confusion. "Here." "What?" But before I could answered, and we both heard it. A child's laughter echoing through the house. It wasn't Ava or Ethan. They were both still sound asleep in the bed beside us. "Liam." Olivia's voice trembled. "What's going on?" I got out of bed, moving quietly to the door. "I don't know. Stay here with the kids. I'll check it out." Ignoring Olivia's protests, I opened the door and stepped into the hallway. The laughter came again, this time from downstairs. I followed the sound, my bare feet silent on the old floorboards. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, in the stillness of the living room, a little girl stood frozen in place, clad in an old-fashioned nightgown. Her long hair cascaded down her back, and she faced away from me, gazing at something unseen. "Hello?" I whispered gently, hoping not to startle her. "Are you lost?" Time seemed to stretch as she slowly turned to face me. I stumbled back, a scream lodged in my throat. Her face mirrored that of the dolls upstairs, porcelain white, with glassy eyes and a painted smile. Yet, unlike the doll, this face was alive. Those glassy eyes blinked slowly, honing in on me. "You shouldn't have come here," the girl said, her voice a curious blend of innocent sweetness and an unsettling depth, as if she carried the weight of ages. "This is our home, and now you can never leave." As if summoned by her words, doors began to slam throughout the house. I heard Olivia's scream from upstairs, mingling with the terrified cries of Ava and Ethan. I turned to flee back to them, but the staircase had vanished, replaced by an unyielding wall. The girls' laughter echoed around me, multiplying until it seemed to envelop me from all directions. The room began to shift, as the shadows danced and the walls began to shift. They twisted into forms that defied reason. Faces emerged from the wallpaper, and whispers slithered through the floorboards. "Welcome home," a girl said, her smile stretching wider than seemed possible. "We've been waiting for a new family for so long." I jolted awake, gasping, my body slick with cold sweat. Olivia was beside me, her face a canvas of concern. "Liam, wake up. You were having a nightmare." My heart raced as I scanned the room, reassured to find the children sleeping soundly beside us. Outside, the storm had passed, and the first light of dawn began to creep in, casting a gentle glow over the remnants of the night. Through the dusty windows, a sense of urgency filled the air. "We need to leave," I said, jumping out of bed. Olivia, sensing the weight of my words, didn't argue. We woke the kids and packed up quickly, practically running to the car. As we drove away, I couldn't resist glancing back at the house in the rearview mirror. For a fleeting moment, I thought I saw a small figure standing in one of the upstairs windows, a porcelain hand raised in farewell. But when I blinked, it vanished. That night became a silent memory, never to be spoken of again. Yet sometimes in my dreams, it lingers still. In the stillness of the night, echoes of a child's laughter linger in the air, and I can almost feel the weight of those glassy eyes upon me. A chill creeps in, a constant reminder of what might have unfolded had we lingered just a moment longer in that house. A place shrouded in mystery and meant to remain undiscovered. The instant I spotted the first hidden camera, the illusion of a peaceful Airbnb escape shattered, plunging me into a waking nightmare. Little did I know, this unsettling revelation was merely the prologue to a terror that would forever alter the course of my life. I had anticipated this vacation for months, a respite from the relentless grind of everyday life. After a long year at work, I found myself yearning for a respite from the relentless pace of city life. It was then that I came across a listing for a cozy cabin nestled in the woods. It seemed just right, quaint, secluded, and most importantly, affordable. The host, William, had received glowing reviews, each one praising his warm hospitality and meticulous attention to detail. As I arrived at the cabin, a wave of relief washed over me. The place was even more enchanting in person, with its rustic wooden exterior and inviting wraparound porch. William was there to greet me, all smiles and warmth. Warm handshakes greeted Olivia as he assisted her with her bags. "I hope you'll find everything to your liking. I've prepared a little welcome basket for you inside." She thanked him, already feeling a sense of ease. William then offered a brief tour of the cabin, highlighting the fully stocked kitchen, the inviting fireplace, and the luxurious bathroom featuring a clawfoot tub. His charisma shone through as he patiently addressed all her questions. "Well, I'll leave you to settle in," William said at last. "Remember, I'm just a call away. Received a phone call away if you need anything. Enjoy your stay." As he drove away, I couldn't believe my luck. The place was perfect, and William seemed like the ideal host. I spent the rest of the evening unpacking, exploring the cabin, and finally sinking into the plush sofa with a glass of wine and a good book. It wasn't until the next morning that I noticed something odd. I was in the bathroom fixing my hair when a glint of something in the mirror caught my eye. At first, I thought it was just a reflection of light, but as I leaned in closer, a chill crept through me. There, nestled within the frame of the mirror, was a tiny camera lens. My thoughts spiraled. Surely this was a mistake. Perhaps some sort of smart home device I simply didn't comprehend. Yet, as I scrutinized it further, the truth became undeniable. A hidden camera, perfectly positioned to capture the entire bathroom. With trembling hands, I reached for my phone to call the police, only to discover I had no signal. Of course, I thought bitterly, I was in the middle of nowhere. Trying to steady my racing heart, I resolved to check the rest of the house. In the dim light of the cabin, a sense of unease began to creep in. What initially felt like a simple oversight transformed into something far more sinister. As I wandered from room to room, I stumbled upon hidden cameras. One nestled within a potted plant in the bedroom, another cleverly disguised as a smoke detector in the living room, and yet another concealed within the coffee maker in the kitchen. A chill ran down my spine as the realization dawned upon me. I was being watched. Every movement, every intimate moment, all recorded without my knowledge. But the question lingered in the air like a thick fog. Who was behind this invasion of privacy? It had to be William, the overly friendly host with his 2 perfect reviews. How many other unsuspecting guests had fallen into his trap? As I quietly observed the scene unfolding, a sense of urgency washed over me. How long had this unsettling situation been brewing? I knew I had to escape swiftly. I began to hastily toss my belongings into my suitcase, disregarding any semblance of order. Then, a sound pierced the stillness, the unmistakable rumble of a car approaching. My heart plummeted as I peered through the curtains. It was William's truck, returning far earlier than I had anticipated. Had he been watching me all along, aware that I had uncovered his hidden cameras? Panic surged within me as I scanned the room for an escape route. The front door was a perilous option. He would surely spot me. My eyes darted to the back door, a glimmer of hope in the shadows. Straight into the dense woods, a place where shadows danced and whispers lingered. Without a map or a guide, the risk of losing my way loomed large. My only refuge was to conceal myself and pray for his departure. I slipped into the bedroom closet, the door creaking softly as I did, just as the front door swung open. William's footsteps resonated through the cabin, slow and deliberate, each step a reminder of the danger that lurked. "Olivia," he called, his voice dripping with a sickly sweetness. "Are you here? I just wanted to check if everything was all right." I held my breath, pressing myself deeper into the darkness of the closet as the footsteps drew nearer. "I know you're here, Olivia," he said, the warmth in his voice fading, replaced by something far more sinister. I could only watch, heart racing, as the shadows closed in around me. As I stumbled upon the cameras, a chill ran down my spine. My heart raced, pounding so fiercely that I feared he might hear it too. The bedroom door creaked open slowly, and there, through the slats of the closet door, I caught a glimpse of William's shadow. "Come on out, Olivia. Don't make this harder than it needs to be," he called, his voice dripping with menace. In that tense moment, I realized I had to act. As his hand reached for the closet door, I burst forth, shoving him with all my strength. Surprise flickered across his face as he stumbled backward. Without a second thought, I dashed away, not daring to look back to see if he would regain his footing. Through the dimly lit bedroom, I dashed past the living room and out the front door, the sound of William's voice echoing behind me, his footsteps thundering on the wooden floors. The gravel driveway crunched beneath my hurried steps as I raced toward my car. Just as my fingers brushed the door handle, a hand seized my arm, yanking me back. I turned to find William before me, his earlier charm vanished, replaced by a chilling fury. "You shouldn't have done that, Olivia," he growled, his voice low and menacing. "Do you have any idea what you've stumbled into?" I felt the struggle within me as I fought against his grip. His grip tightened around my mind, and I felt the urgency to escape. In that moment of desperation, I remembered my car keys, still nestled in my pocket. With my free hand, I reached in and grasped them, fumbling for the panic button. The sudden, shrill alarm shattered the stillness, startling William just enough for me to wrench my arm free. Seizing the moment, I kneed him in the groin, and he doubled over in pain. I leapt into my car, locking the doors behind me. My hands trembled so violently that I struggled to insert the key into the ignition, while William, recovering, stumbled toward the vehicle. With a look that could chill the bones, the engine sprang to life, and I thrust the car into reverse, tires shrieking against the gravel as I fled the driveway. Speeding down the winding dirt road away from the cabin, I caught a glimpse of William in my rearview mirror, his figure shrinking into the distance. Yet the fear clung to me like a shadow. How many other cabins did he possess? How many unsuspecting souls were under his watchful gaze at that very moment? I drove for what felt like an eternity, not pausing until I finally reached the nearest police station. The officers listened intently to my tale, their expressions shifting to one of deepening concern as they sprang into action. As they arrived at the cabin, they took my statement and gathered evidence from my phone, where I had captured images of the hidden cameras. They promised a thorough investigation. In the days that followed, the true extent of William's operation began to unfold. Multiple properties, hundreds of hours of footage, and countless victims. The media seized the story, labeling it the cabin voyeur case. I was approached for interviews to share my experience, but I declined. All I wished for was to forget. Yet, forgetting became an elusive dream, as every hotel room and every rental seemed to echo the haunting memories. As the days turned into weeks, the property transformed into a haunting reminder of my unease. I found myself scanning every corner, every shadow, convinced that unseen eyes were tracking my every step. Night after night, I was tormented by dreams of William's face, intertwined with the chilling thought of hidden cameras lurking in the dark, capturing my every move. Yet, as time flowed gently onward, I began to piece my life back together. Therapy became a guiding light, and the unwavering support of friends and family wrapped around me like a comforting blanket. I took a stand, advocating for stricter regulations on short-term rentals, seeking to shield others from the same dread that had once consumed me. It was a small victory, but it restored a sense of control in a world that had felt so chaotic. As I find myself nestled within the familiar embrace of my own home, the sturdy walls offering a sense of security, I can't help but ponder the fragility of trust. That Airbnb listing had beckoned with promises of a serene escape, a moment to unwind and rejuvenate. Yet, it morphed into a haunting experience, revealing a shadowy side of the hospitality realm that had remained hidden from my view. Though I continue to journey and seek refuge in hotels and rentals, I now carry with me a discreet device, a guardian against unseen eyes. Some may label it as paranoia, but for me, it is a small sacrifice for the comfort of knowing I am truly safe. I understand deeply that often the true peril lies not in what is visible, but in the shadows of the unseen. The experience transformed me, undeniably so, yet it also fortified my spirit, heightened my awareness, and instilled a fierce resolve to safeguard not only myself but also those who might find themselves preyed upon by individuals like William. If my tale can spare even a single soul from enduring what I faced, then perhaps there is a glimmer of hope to be found amidst those harrowing days spent in the cabin. As I pen these final words, I come to terms with the notion that the fear may linger, but I shall carry on regardless. I refuse to let it dictate my life. I will continue to live, to explore, and to stand strong, ensuring that my experience does not befall another soul. Ultimately, the greatest triumph lies in not allowing the shadows to prevail. The moment I understood I was not solitary in the wild, my solitary camping journey morphed into a haunting ordeal from which there seemed no escape. What began as a quest for self-discovery transformed into a frantic struggle for survival, with an unseen hunter shadowing my every step. Though I had always embraced the trails, this was my inaugural venture into the depths of solitude. As I embarked on a week-long solo trek through the backcountry, the rocky trail beckoned to me, promising the perfect blend of beauty, remoteness, and just the right touch of danger to stir the spirit. For months, I had meticulously prepared, gathering the lightest gear, poring over maps, and honing my body into peak condition. The first 2 days unfolded like a dream, each moment steeped in solitude that felt both refreshing and invigorating. The scenery was nothing short of breathtaking, and I found joy in the silence, punctuated only by the sweet melodies of birds and the soft crunch of leaves beneath my boots. On the second night, as I set up camp, I felt a sense of peace wash over me, watching the world around me transform under the fading light. As the sun dipped below the horizon, it painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, and I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. But on the third day, a shift began to unfold. At first, it was merely a feeling, a prickling sensation at the back of my neck, as if unseen eyes were upon me. I brushed it off as paranoia, a natural unease that comes with solitude in the wild. Yet, as the day wore on, that feeling grew stronger. I began to notice small, unsettling details. A twig snapping despite my stillness, the rustle of leaves in the absence of wind. Once, I could have sworn I heard something lurking just beyond my sight, saw a shadow move between the trees, a fleeting glimpse that sent a shiver down my spine. When I turned to look, there was nothing but the stillness of the night. As I huddled in my tent, every sound from the forest seemed to echo in the darkness. The hooting of an owl startled me, and the scurrying of a small animal near my tent had me reaching for my flashlight, my heart racing. I tried to calm myself, reminding my mind that these were merely the usual sounds of the woods at night, yet a nagging feeling whispered that something was amiss. When dawn finally broke, I awoke groggy from a restless night. As I stepped out of my tent, I froze, my gaze fixed on the soft dirt around my. At the campsite, I stumbled upon footprints, human footprints, that didn't match my own boots. A chill crept through me as I examined the prints. They circled my tent, coming alarmingly close, as if the person who made them could have reached out and touched the fabric. The unsettling thought of someone standing there while I slept, completely unaware and vulnerable, made my stomach churn. In a flurry, I packed up camp, my hands trembling as I hurriedly stuffed my gear into my backpack. All thoughts of continuing my trip vanished. I longed only for the comfort of civilization, the safety of familiar surroundings. But as I began to hike away, a sense of dread lingered in the air. As I continued on my path, it became clear that my ordeal was far from over. The sensation of being watched intensified, wrapping around me like a thick fog. Every few moments, I would turn sharply, convinced that I might catch a fleeting glimpse of my unseen pursuer. Yet each time, the trail behind me remained hauntingly empty. As the day slipped away, I began to notice subtle signs of disturbance. A broken branch here, a patch of moss that seemed out of place there. These small details, easily dismissed by the unobservant, shouted of a presence to my heightened awareness. I quickened my pace, pushing through the burning in my legs and the sweat that clung to my skin, driven by an instinct that urged me to flee. The nearest town lay 2 days ahead, yet I was resolute in my quest to reach it in just one. I dared not linger, pausing only briefly to sip water and regain my breath. As the afternoon light waned into evening, my circumstances shifted from troubling to dire. Dark clouds gathered ominously, and the woods echoed with the rumble of thunder. What began as a gentle drizzle swiftly escalated into a torrential downpour, drenching me to the bone. The trail beneath my feet transformed into a treacherous quagmire, and deep down, I understood that stopping was the wisest choice. I set up my tent, seeking refuge from the storm, yet the unsettling feeling of something lurking behind me urged me forward. I stumbled through the darkness, my headlamp casting eerie shadows that danced at the edges of my sight. Then, a sudden flash of lightning illuminated the path ahead, revealing a figure that made my heart freeze. Not 20 feet in front of me stood a tall, unnaturally thin silhouette, its outline obscured by the rain. For a fleeting moment, our eyes seemed to connect, or so I believed. Where its eyes should have been, there was only an abyss of darkness. "Sockets!" I screamed, the sound lost in a crack of thunder. I turned and ran, no longer caring about the trail, no longer caring about anything except getting away from that thing. Branches whipped at my face as I crashed through the underbrush. I could hear something moving behind me, keeping pace effortlessly despite the difficult terrain. My foot caught on a root, and I went down hard, tumbling down a steep incline. I came to a stop at the bottom, dazed and in pain. As I lay there, the rain pelting my face, and then I heard it, footsteps, slow and deliberate. As I made my way down the hill, a deliberate sound echoed in the stillness, drawing my attention. I attempted to rise, but a sharp pain shot through my ankle, leaving me immobilized. The footsteps halted just behind me, and an unsettling presence enveloped me. With a heart full of dread, I turned to face the source, only to find emptiness. Confusion washed over me. Had it all been a figment of my imagination, a trick of my mind? Just then, a twig snapped to my left, prompting me to jerk my head in that direction. Yet there was nothing. Another crack, this time to my right, and still I found only silence. It dawned on me that whatever lingered in the shadows was playing with me, relishing in my fear. With a heart pounding in the stillness of the night, I gritted my teeth against the pain and forced myself to my feet. Lying there was not an option. I had to keep moving. I limped forward, using the sturdy trees as my support. Each shadow loomed ominously, concealing potential threats, while every sound echoed like a whisper of danger. The rain had softened to a gentle drizzle, yet I found myself shivering uncontrollably, a mix of fear and cold coursing through me. As I stumbled along, I sought to unravel the mystery of my predicament. Was I being hunted by a psychopath, a deranged hermit lost to madness? Or was there something far more sinister lurking in the dark? Something else entirely, something not quite human. I didn't have time to dwell on these questions for long. Ahead, I saw a flicker of light through the trees. Hope surged through me, civilization, safety. I pushed myself harder, ignoring the protests of my battered body. The light grew brighter, resolving into the glow of electric lights. A ranger station. With a final burst of energy, I burst out of the tree line. The station was there, solid and real, its windows bright against the darkness of the forest. I half ran, half limped to the door. With what little strength remained, I pounded on the door, my voice a hoarse whisper from hours of frantic breaths. "Help!" I croaked, desperation lacing my words. "Please, someone help me." The door creaked open, and I nearly collapsed into the arms of a startled park ranger. "Whoa," he said, steadying me as I stumbled inside. "What happened to you?" I struggled to explain, my words spilling out in a chaotic rush. Footprints, a chase, a shadowy figure, and the crack of lightning. The ranger listened intently, his brow furrowing with concern. Okay, slow down," he urged, gently guiding me to a chair. "You're safe now. Let's get you warmed up, and then we'll figure this out." As he wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and pressed a mug of hot coffee into my hands, I couldn't help but glance out the window. The forest pressed close to the station, dark and impenetrable. Was it still out there, watching, waiting? The next few days were a blur of police statements and medical checkups. They found my abandoned campsite, confirming at least part of my story. But there was no sign of my pursuer, no evidence of... In the stillness of the woods, where shadows dance and whispers linger, many brushed off my tale as mere fright from the familiar sounds of nature. Some even hinted at a breakdown, a product of stress. Yet, the park ranger, with a knowing gaze, leaned in closer, his voice low and steady. "These woods are ancient," he murmured, ensuring no one else could hear. "They harbor secrets, things beyond belief. Whatever you encountered, be grateful you emerged." As I made my way home, my ankle bound and my heart still racing, the weight of his words settled in the quiet of the night. There are moments when the shadows of the past linger, refusing to fade away. Even now, when I close my eyes, the image of that figure flashes before me, illuminated by the jagged light of a storm. Those hollow eyes seem to pierce through the veil of my thoughts, leaving an indelible mark on my very being. The thought of camping again fills me with dread. What was once a sanctuary of tranquility and adventure has transformed into a realm of fear. Yet, amidst this unease, one truth remains. Whatever lurked in those woods was undeniably real, and somewhere, deep within the dark embrace of the rocky trail, it patiently waits, ever watchful, ever hunting. I'll remain within the comforting embrace of the city, yet a part of me understands that one day I must return to those woods, until I confront whatever it was that pursued me through the rain and darkness. The fear that now lingers will never truly release its grip on me. The wilderness may have claimed this round, but I sense the game is far from over. The moment I heard those strange noises echoing from the seemingly empty floor, I realized my ordinary night shift was on the brink of becoming something truly unsettling. Little did I know what awaited me was about to uncover something that would linger in my thoughts forever. My name is James, and for the past 6 months, I have been a night janitor at Bridgewater Associates. While it may not be the most glamorous of jobs, it pays the bills and allows me ample time to focus on my screenplay during the stillness of the night. The building itself is a typical office tower, all glass and steel, with 50 floors filled with cubicles, conference rooms, and corner offices. On this particular night, I was following my usual routine, having just begun my work. As I made my way up from the ground floor, each step felt like a familiar routine, a numbing task I had grown accustomed to. The solitude enveloped me, broken only by the steady hum of the vacuum cleaner and the occasional ping of the elevator. It was on the 37th floor that I first sensed something unusual, a thud, followed by what seemed like muffled voices. I froze, my hands still gripping the vacuum's handle. The 37th floor was meant to be empty. In fact, the entire building was supposed to be deserted at this hour. I switched off the vacuum, straining to catch any sound in the sudden stillness. There it was again, the unmistakable sound of voices drifting down from the floor above. My heart began to race, a flutter of unease settling in. Were we being robbed? Should I call security? I found myself caught in a moment of hesitation. If it turned out to be just some employees working late, I would feel rather foolish for raising an alarm. Yet, Something deep within me whispered that this was not a typical occurrence. Gathering my courage, I resolved to investigate. I left the vacuum where it was and made my way to the stairwell. As I ascended the stairs to the 38th floor, the voices grew louder, and I could discern at least two distinct speakers, though I stood before the door to the 38th floor, uncertainty swirling in my mind as I strained to decipher the muffled voices beyond. My hand hovered over the handle, a moment of hesitation gripping me. What if they were armed? What if I was stepping into a perilous situation? Yet, the pull of curiosity proved stronger than my caution. With a slow, deliberate motion, I eased the door open, wincing at the creaking sound that echoed in the stillness. The 38th floor unfolded before me, much like the others, a labyrinth of cubicles encircling a central area filled with conference rooms. But this floor held a peculiar difference. It was not shrouded in darkness. A faint light spilled from one of the conference rooms, casting long, eerie shadows that danced across the floor. Across the office, I moved quietly, my heart racing in my chest, each beat echoing in my ears. As I approached the illuminated room, the voices grew more distinct. The shipment arrives tomorrow night. We must be prepared. What about security? Thompson's been asking questions. Don't concern yourself with Thompson. He's been dealt with. A shiver coursed through me. This was no ordinary late-night gathering. Whatever was unfolding here held an air of illegality and danger. I edged closer, straining to catch a glimpse through the narrow opening, careful not to reveal my presence. Through the door, I could discern three figures, huddled around a table strewn with papers and what appeared to be blueprints. One of them gestured emphatically at something on the table, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. The boss wants this to go smoothly. No mistakes this time. Got it. The others nodded, their expressions grave. I leaned in, eager to glimpse the contents of the table, when suddenly calamity struck. My foot snagged on a loose piece of carpet and I stumbled. Though I managed to steady myself before falling, my elbow collided with the wall, echoing in the tense silence. With a dull thud, the voices in the room fell silent, as if the air itself had thickened. Chairs scraped against the floor, and footsteps approached the door, each sound echoing in the stillness. Panic surged through me, a primal instinct urging me to flee. I turned and ran, abandoning any thought of stealth. Behind me, shouts erupted, and the conference room door banged open, a cacophony of urgency. I sprinted toward the stairwell, my mind focused solely on putting as much distance as possible between myself and those men. Bursting through the stairwell door, I descended the stairs, taking them two at a time, propelled by the need to escape the looming shadows of the unknown. Footsteps echoed ominously above me, drawing nearer with each passing moment. My lungs ached, and my legs felt heavy, yet the grip of fear propelled me onward. I had just reached the 30th floor when the stairwell door above me slammed open with a resounding crash. "There he is!" a voice shouted, and the footsteps quickened, growing louder and more frantic. I dared not glance back. I simply ran, my feet barely grazing the stairs as I raced down. 25th floor, 20th, 15th. My pursuers were closing in, their heavy breaths and shouts reverberating in the air. As I reached the 10th floor, a wild idea flickered in my mind. Instead of continuing my descent, I burst out onto In the stillness of the dark office, I moved swiftly, weaving through the maze of desks and cubicles. The sounds of their frustrated voices echoed behind me, a reminder of the chase that unfolded in the shadows. Reaching the far side of the floor, I spotted my destination, the second stairwell. With a firm grip, I pulled the door open and descended, hoping they would squander their time searching the 10th floor, unaware of my clever maneuver. As I reached the ground floor, I could hear them enter the second stairwell, but by then, I was already far from their grasp. Suddenly, the stairwell door swung open, and a rush of chaos spilled into the lobby, startling the night security guard at his desk. "Call the police," I gasped, struggling to catch my breath. "There are men upstairs." But before I could finish my warning, The stairwell door burst open once more, and two men emerged, their faces twisted with fury. They skidded to a halt upon seeing the security guard, who was already on his feet, one hand resting on his weapon. For a brief moment, we all stood frozen, a tableau of confusion and fear. Then, one of the men flashed a cold, calculating smile that sent a chill through my veins. There appeared to be a slight misunderstanding, he said with a calm demeanor. Our friend here, he gestured toward me, had perhaps indulged a bit too much at the office party. We were merely ensuring he made it home safely. The security guard hesitated, his gaze flickering between me and the two men. I felt the urge to speak, to reveal the truth of what I had witnessed. But the words caught in my throat as I noticed the second man slowly reaching into his jacket. In that fleeting moment, clarity struck me, and I made a choice. I turned and fled, bursting through the lobby doors and into the enveloping night. As I hurried through the night, I could hear shouts echoing behind me, but I pressed on, my legs pushing me forward until they could carry me no longer. Eventually, I found myself in a 24-hour diner, trembling and drenched in sweat. I sat there, grappling with my next move, when my phone buzzed unexpectedly. A message from an unknown number chilled me to the bone. We know who you are. Keep quiet if you want to stay healthy. A wave of dread washed over me. How had they gotten my number? What else lay hidden in their knowledge of me? The rest of the night unfolded in a blur of anxiety, each sound making me jump, each passing car a potential threat lurking in the shadows. When dawn finally broke, I found myself standing outside the police station, ready to report what I had witnessed. Yet, as I lingered there, doubt began to seep in. Would they believe me? I had no proof, just my word against theirs. If these men were as connected as they appeared, would approaching the police only place me in greater danger? In the end, I turned away. That day, I resigned from my job, fabricating a story about a family emergency. The following week, I moved out of my apartment, revealing my plans to no one. It has been 3 months since that fateful night, and the shadows of my decision still linger. In a new city, with a fresh job and a different name, I find myself unable to shake the unsettling sensation of being observed. Each time I catch sight of a suit-clad businessman or hear footsteps echoing behind me, I am transported back to that harrowing stairwell, fleeing for my life. What I uncovered that night remains a mystery. Perhaps a drug operation, corporate espionage, or something even darker. Yet, one truth stands clear. The world is shrouded in shadows, and the most perilous events often unfold right beneath our noses, in the most unsuspecting places. So, if you find yourself working late one night, as night falls and the world outside grows quiet, a sound breaks the stillness, something you shouldn't hear. My advice, dear listener, is simple: run. Run and don't look back, for once you glimpse what lies behind the veil, there's no returning to the comforting embrace of ignorance. In this realm of secrets and shadows, that ignorance may be your only shield. I remember the first time I heard the scratching in the walls. I brushed it off as mere mice, but by the time I uncovered the chilling truth, it was nearly too late. What began as an innocuous house-sitting job spiraled into a nightmare that would linger in my thoughts long after the darkness had passed. The rest of my life, my name's Sophia, and I had agreed to watch my friend Olivia's house while she was away on a month-long business trip. It seemed like a sweet deal, a break from my cramped apartment, a chance to enjoy a spacious home in a quiet suburb. Little did I know I was walking into a trap. The first few days were uneventful. I settled into a routine, working remotely during the day and enjoying the peace and quiet in the evenings. Olivia's house was beautiful, a 2-story colonial with lots of character. But as the sun set each night, a subtle shift began to weave through the air. The house seemed to transform, adopting a personality all its own. Shadows stretched longer, and an oppressive silence enveloped the space. It was on the 4th night that I first heard it, a faint scratching sound emanating from somewhere within the walls. I was nestled on the couch, lost in a book, when the noise pulled me from my reverie. Initially, I dismissed it as the house settling, but as I listened more intently, the scratching grew more deliberate, more purposeful. Rising from my seat, I pressed my ear against the wall, and the sound became unmistakable. A rhythmic scraping that sent a chill down my spine. Down my spine, a sensation crept, as if something was stirring within the very walls, moving slowly upward. Just mice? I whispered to myself, attempting to soothe my racing heart. Old houses like this are bound to have mice. I reassured myself, yet deep down, I sensed the truth eluding me. The scratching was too loud, too forceful to be the work of mere mouse paws. Whatever lurked within those walls was something far larger. That night, sleep evaded me as I tossed and turned, the scratching echoing intermittently in the darkness. By morning, I had convinced myself it was merely my imagination running wild, but the house held its secrets close, whispering in the shadows. In the gentle embrace of daylight, the sunlight poured through the windows, casting away the shadows of the night and making its fears seem almost trivial. Yet, as darkness crept back in, the sounds began to stir once more. This time, they were louder, more demanding, echoing from not just one wall, but from multiple corners of the house. It felt as if unseen entities were scuttling within the very walls themselves. I reached out to Olivia, my voice trembling as I recounted the unsettling symphony of scratching. Her response was laced with concern, yet tinged with skepticism. "The house is old, Sophia," she reassured me. "It makes all sorts of noises, but if you truly feel uneasy, don't hesitate to call. My handyman, his number resting on the fridge, was a comforting thought." I thanked her and hung up, a slight sense of reassurance washing over me. The next morning, I dialed the number, and a gruff-voiced man named Ethan answered. He agreed to come by that afternoon to take a look. Ethan arrived around 3 p.m. With a toolbox in hand, he was an older man, his weathered features and calloused hands telling tales of years spent in labor. I guided him through the house, sharing the unsettling noises that had been haunting me. He listened with a calm demeanor, then set about a meticulous inspection of the walls. He tapped gently, paused to listen intently, and even took the time to cut a small opening. In the dim light, we found a hole in one of the walls, and I held my flashlight steady as Ethan peered inside. After a long hour, he turned to me, his brow furrowed. "I don't see any signs of pests," he said, his voice low. "No droppings, no chew marks." He trailed off, his frown deepening. "What about them?" I pressed, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. Ethan shook his head slowly. "They're solid. No hollow spaces where animals could be moving around." A chill crept down my spine, but I couldn't shake the feeling. "I heard it," I insisted, my voice barely above a whisper. Clear as day, scratching, moving up and down. Ethan gave me a look that sent a shiver through the air. He gave me a long look, then sighed. "Listen, miss, sometimes in old houses like this, the mind can play tricks. You're here alone. It's a strange place. Maybe you're just a bit on edge." I wanted to argue, to make him understand that this wasn't in my head, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. He thought I was imagining things, or worse, that I was some hysterical woman making a fuss over nothing. After Ethan left, I felt even more uneasy. If the noises weren't coming from inside the walls, where were they coming from? And more, as night descended, an unsettling scratching began anew, more ferocious than before. It echoed through the stillness, accompanied by a low, guttural groaning that sent shivers down my spine. The sound enveloped me, coming from all directions, a haunting presence that I could not escape. I hurried from room to room, pressing my ear against the walls, searching for the origin of the eerie symphony. Yet, it was in vain. The noises danced just beyond my grasp. In a moment of desperation, I resolved to venture down to the basement, hoping to uncover the source of this chilling disturbance. Something lingered in the house, perhaps a trace of its presence awaited discovery. I took a deep breath, grasped my flashlight, and steeled my nerves before descending the creaky wooden stairs. The basement lay shrouded in darkness and mustiness, cluttered with old furniture and boxes. My flashlight beam sliced through the gloom, casting long shadows that danced and flickered. The scratching grew louder here, echoing through the concrete floor as I ventured deeper into the basement. Suddenly, my foot caught on something, and I stumbled, the flashlight clattering to the ground. As I bent to retrieve it, my hand brushed against something unexpected. As I stood there, my heart racing, I felt something unusual beneath my feet, something that resembled a handle. With a trembling hand, I aimed my flashlight beam at the source of my unease. There, partially concealed by an old rug, lay a trapdoor. It was crafted from heavy wood, adorned with a rusty iron handle. To my horror, I noticed the door shift ever so slightly, as if something lurking beneath was straining to break free. I instinctively recoiled. A scream lodged in my throat, as the scratching sounds intensified from below, growing more desperate with each passing moment. Whatever resided in the darkness knew of my presence, and it yearned for escape. In a panic, I fled the scene. As I hurried down the stairs, the basement door slammed shut behind me, yet the scratching and groaning persisted, now joined by a rhythmic thumping. Something was trying to escape. With trembling hands, I called out to Olivia once more, this time revealing everything. The unsettling noises, Ethan's unexpected visit, and the trap door in the basement. A heavy silence enveloped the line before Olivia finally responded. Her voice transformed, cold and resigned. "You weren't supposed to find that," she said softly. "What?" I gasped, my heart racing. "Olivia, what are you?" As I spoke of the darkness below, I felt a chill creep into the air. "I'm sorry, Sophia," she murmured, her voice distant, as if she were lost in her own thoughts. I had hoped for silence during my absence, but deep down, I should have anticipated the truth. "Olivia, you're frightening me. Please, just tell me what's happening." A heavy silence lingered before she finally whispered, "It's hungry, Sophia. It's always hungry. And now that it knows you're there." Her voice faded, leaving only the eerie stillness. The line went dead, and I stood frozen, phone clutched tightly in my hand, as the dreadful realization settled in. Olivia had known all along, and she had sent me here, fully aware of what lurked in the shadows. In the stillness of the night, a sudden crash echoed from the basement, pulling me from my thoughts. The thumping grew louder, more urgent, as if something was determined to break free. I rushed to the front door, only to find it stubbornly locked. The windows, too, sealed tight as if by some unseen force. Panic set in. I was trapped. The sounds intensified, heavy footsteps dragging up the basement stairs, accompanied by a low, hungry growl that sent chills down my spine. I backed into a corner, my heart racing, eyes scanning for anything. A weapon, a means of defense against the encroaching darkness. A chilling thought crept into my mind, one that sent shivers down my spine. How many others had come before me? How many house sitters had Olivia sent to tend to whatever lurked beneath the house? Suddenly, the basement door swung open, casting a dim light that revealed a glimpse of something pale and twisted, with too many limbs and eyes that glimmered in the shadows. It lunged toward me, its mouth opening wide to expose rows of jagged teeth. In that moment, I understood my fate was sealed. I can't quite recall how I managed to survive that night. The next thing I remember is waking up in a hospital, my body a canvas of cuts and bruises. The police had many questions, yet I found myself without answers. As they investigated the house, it revealed no signs of the horrors I had endured. No trapdoor, no lurking monster. Even Olivia, when questioned, had an alibi for the entire time. At times, I ponder if it truly happened, if perhaps Ethan was correct and my mind had merely conjured these terrors from the shadows of an old house. But then, I catch a glimpse of movement from the corner of my eye or hear a faint scratching in a quiet room, and I am reminded that it was not confined to that house alone, and it lingers still, lurking with an insatiable hunger. So, if you ever find yourself asked to house sit, particularly in an old house rich with stories, tread carefully. Pay heed to the whispers of the walls, and if you catch the sound of scratching, flee, run, and do not glance back, for some things, once stirred, can never be lulled back into slumber.